off.
And efforts to contain the outbreak have sped up. Hong Kong now says it will quarantine all arrivals from mainland China, and Japan's confirmed 10 more cases from a cruise ship, bringing the number of infections from that vessel to 20 so far.
It's interesting because earlier this week, Roger, Bloomberg put out a story about how China was rethinking everything from cutting its global growth forecast to force majeure on LNG deliveries. And guess what? In a rare step that shows how deeply the epidemic is impacting global commodity flows, today we hear that China's biggest buyer of liquefied natural gas told some suppliers it won't take delivery of cargoes because of constraints caused by the coronavirus.
And Beijing's announced some steps to ease the pain on business. It's halving tariffs on $75 billion of imports from February the 14th. That's the same time that US tariffs on Chinese goods are set to be cut. And the reductions are part of the Phase 1 trade deal signed with Washington last month. The yuan extended gains after the news on that tariff reduction.
Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and Russia remain split over the threat of Asia's coronavirus to the oil markets. Talks between experts from OPEC and its allies are extending into an unprecedented third day. The kingdom has been pushing for the cartel to reduce output as the outbreak hits demand. But we've learned that while Russia is willing to extend the current cuts, which are due to expire in March, it doesn't want additional measures.
And turning to Europe, Germany's manufacturing recession looks far from over after the latest data showed factory orders falling at their fastest pace in more than a decade. Demand fell 2.1% in December. It's now down 8.7% from a year ago. Orders are a key gauge because they indicate future output.
And here in the UK, economic growth targets are being called into question. The National Institute of Economic and Social Research says the Chancellor's targets are, quote, quite unrealistic. Sajid Javid wants to lift economic growth to its post-war average of almost 3% a year, but the think tank says the proposed policies are unlikely to offset the impact of Brexit.
And back to earnings, Societe Generale is pledging to boost shareholder returns. That's as it shifts to a new cash dividend policy. It comes after the French lender warned investors to expect muted growth. Soc Gen also signalling it's set to miss a key profitability target.
And Brexit may be about to get worse for the City of London. Officials in the EU are looking to amend MiFID II. They want to walk away from concessions they made to the UK in the 6 years it took to complete the regulations. Rules governing research spending and trading in stocks, derivatives and commodities are likely to be revised.
Now we're looking at pictures from the European Parliament where Christine Lagarde, head of the ECB, is just taking her seat. Now she's going to be talking to one of the key committees there in the Parliament, talking to MEPs about many things, not least, I guess, the review that's coming up of the ECB, its targets, not least, of course, the inflation target, very important there. She may also reflect, I guess, on the coronavirus, Naira, because that is one of those things that she's already mentioned as a factor in economic uncertainty.
She has, saying the coronavirus is a renewed source of concern. She's likely to be asked questions about that, but she's also said that the ECB has significantly reduced its scope for action. That was a red headline that we saw breaking a few minutes ago. In terms of the inflation outlook, she said the ECB is developing a consumer survey on the inflation outlook. But, you know, the ECB is also closely monitoring potential policy side effects, though there are tentative signs of stabilization and the domestic economy remains relatively resilient. We are awaiting to hear from Christine Lagarde. It'll also be interesting to hear what she has to say, given that we had that worse than expected number on German factory orders as well. So anything she can say on the outlook on the Eurozone economy is going to be closely listened to. Christine Lagarde taking the stage, addressing the European Parliament.
We're just waiting to see if she's going to start speaking. I think she's actually just still, I think, dealing with the bits of administration before she actually begins her speech. It's an interesting session, I think, not least, you obviously mentioned about the inflation target. Interesting that we had Peter Prate, who was the former ECB chief economist earlier on Daybreak Europe. He was saying he didn't think the inflation target was necessarily the absolutely key thing of the review, or perhaps not the thing even that she's mostly focusing on, although a lot of people have suspected that is a key thing, because inflation is a very important element in what happens as far as the Eurozone is concerned there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what Bloomberg Economics has been saying is that the ECB is going to leave no stone unturned in its quest to explain the stubborn weakness of inflation. All that pebble flipping is going to take about a year. We will get to Christine Lagarde in just a moment, but first let's get to the world news with Leanne Gerrans.
Good morning, Naira. In the US, President Trump has been acquitted in his impeachment trial. He was cleared of the charges of abusing power and obstructing Congress. Utah Senator Mitt Romney was the only Republican to break ranks. He cleared the president of the obstruction charge, but voted to find Trump guilty of abusing power. Justice Chief John Roberts made the announcement.
It is therefore ordered and adjudged that the said Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby, acquitted of the charges in said articles.
Let's cross over to Turkey, where at least 3 people have died after a Boeing 737-800 split open after landing in Turkey. 179 people were injured when the jet veered off the runway in wet weather. The rear of the plane caught fire. The front detached and came to rest upside down. Now, to more on the impact of the coronavirus. The impact from the virus on the Australian economy is significant, according to Prime Minister Scott Morrison. He also says the situation can't be compared with SARS or MERS, as economic dependency on the country on China is now much greater.
The challenge here, undoubtedly it'll have a significant impact. What we saw previously with SARS and MERS, I think it was an 11% fall in international tourism visitation in one quarter, backed up by is what it was then, would not be right.
And Hollywood legend Kirk Douglas has died aged 103, starring in more than 80 movies across 7 decades. He is perhaps best known for Spartacus. As a producer, he hired blacklisted screenwriter Dalton Trumbo. The move was instrumental in letting filmmakers banned during McCarthyism return back to Hollywood. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Thanks so much indeed for that, Leanne Gerrans, with all the latest news. Now, we're going, just a reminder that we're waiting for the beginning of Christine Lagarde's speech, discussion, indeed Q&A with members of the European Parliament there in Brussels. We're keeping an eye at the moment. We can see that she's about to start speaking, but just a reminder, we're going to be analysing what she says afterwards, all the various trends that we're looking at, not least, obviously, the issue of inflation, which is one of the things that needs to be talked about, and also possibly the coronavirus effect.
Yeah, absolutely, the coronavirus. What we've heard from Lagarde so far is that this low interest rate and low inflation environment has significantly reduced the scope for the ECB and other central banks worldwide to ease monetary policy in the face of an economic downturn. What is she going to say on the outlook for the economy? We got painful factory orders data from Germany just today. She did say earlier the euro area economy remains relatively resilient and continues to grow broadly in line with expectations, though still with modest momentum. The impact of the coronavirus is a renewed source of concern. She also said the ECB is planning a series of listening events, first of which will be in Brussels in March.
We're going to be talking about what she has to say afterwards with Frédéric Ducrozet, who's a strategist at Pictet Wealth Management. He'll be giving us a sense of what the market was likely to make of her words, because it's being watched very closely, not least, of course, because of that very disappointing German factory data that came out this morning, suggesting things are clearly not well within the Eurozone. Although the actual impact of that data is interesting there. It's quite volatile data in itself, isn't it? It's not something necessarily that is definitely decisive in terms of the way the German economy is going.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the market reaction certainly to it has been muted today. In the past, we might have seen a little bit more of a reaction, but in markets right now, it really seems like there's resilience in risk assets. If we take a look at European equities, trading in the green for the fourth day in a row, in fact, up 0.5% on the Stock 600. There seems to be, yesterday, the optimism was fueled by speculation that there could be some vaccines on the cards for coronavirus. The WHO obviously pushed back on that, saying not to get excited about there being any kind of imminent breakthrough. But then we got the US non-manufacturing, the ISM data come through at a 5-month high. That added to the risk sentiment as well. And it seems even with a number like that we got out of Germany, that certainly hasn't shaken equities. It also didn't really move the bond market. The 10-year bund yield absolutely, in fact, if anything, edging higher now by a basis point at -35, and the euro is also ever so slightly in positive territory. We're still awaiting Christine Lagarde. The euro, though, did sort of give up some earlier gains on the German factory data, but it hasn't really moved too much on it. And by the way, the decline was driven by Eurozone investment and consumer goods.
I should tell you at the moment, Irene Tinagli, who's the chair of the European Parliament Committee, which is being addressed by Christine Lagarde, is currently doing the introduction to Christine Lagarde. Christine Lagarde, of course, a figure better known really in politics in the last 10, 15 years than she is in economics, and yet she is now in a position perhaps to achieve rather more than Mario Draghi perhaps did during his tenure, a sense that this is a moment of change perhaps in the ECB, Naira, a moment where she has a field where perhaps she can bring everyone on board in a way that Mario Draghi perhaps couldn't necessarily.
I mean, that's something that's sort of been said about her even when it was first announced, her candidacy, that she's a consensus builder. And certainly what was interesting when she did the interview for us from Davos, and there were questions posed to her about what was going to come out of the stability review, she kept saying, look, there's no point saying too much about it until we actually do it. The whole point of the review is actually to carry it out, and then we'll tell you what comes out of it. So you do get the sense that she's very much in listening mode. She wants to hear all sorts of points of view, and she sort of wants to take her time to come to conclusions rather than guiding the market perhaps in the way some other central bankers do. She even said, I know every time that I make a monetary policy decision, people are going to be looking at whether I'm smiling or whether I'm serious, but she said, do not read too much into my facial expressions.
Well, she's certainly looking pretty serious at the moment as she's hearing this introduction from Irene Tinagli. Anyway, let's hear for now from Christine Lagarde speaking to the European Parliament.
Affairs Committee, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a pleasure to be back here and to appear before you after the first Governing Council meeting that we had in 2020 just recently, during which the ECB and the Eurosystem at large decided to launch its strategy review, its monetary strategy review, to be very specific. It's been 16 years since the ECB had conducted a monetary policy strategy review, and as we discussed in December, in 2003, the world looked very different, and many things have changed in between, which clearly warrants the fact that the strategy of monetary policy be reviewed by the ECB. Structural changes have profoundly affected our environment from an economic as well as other standpoints, and this will continue to be so. More specifically in the field that is of concern to us, declining growth trend on the back of slowing productivity growth and an aging population, and the legacy and the financial crisis have driven interest rates down. This low interest rate and low inflation environment has significantly reduced the scope for the ECB and other central banks worldwide to ease monetary policy in the face of an economic downturn. And structural challenges such as new threats to environmental sustainability, rapid digitalization, globalization, and evolving financial structure have also affected price development and therefore the environment that central banks have a duty to monitor, where they forecast, need, and to factor into their policies. And in the light of these changes, now is the appropriate time for us to conduct that strategy review with a broad scope to ensure that we continue to deliver on our mandate in the best interests of the Europeans. During my last meeting before this committee, I made a commitment to listen to people's expectations and better understand their economic concerns. And by the way, I have read with great interest some of the papers that you had commissioned to inform us better about communication of central banks and how people are or not attentive or sensitive to this. This Parliament and your Commission, obviously, will be the primary forum for this listening exercise and for putting in practice the principle of a two-way communication as I have outlined it at our last meeting. So I'm very happy that you've asked me to discuss specifically central bank communication today. But before I get to that, allow me to first provide an overview of the current economic situation in the euro area. And I'm not going to be very different from what you have just outlined, Madam Chair. Broadly in line with our expectations, The euro area economy continues to grow, though still with modest momentum. The domestic economy remains relatively resilient. Private consumption, for instance, increased by 0.5% in the third quarter of 2019 on the back of further improvements in the labour market conditions. The unemployment rate stands at 7.4%, which is its lowest rate since July 2008. The number of people employed keeps increasing and has increased by more than 11 million since mid-2013. The more domestically oriented services and construction sectors also continue to hold up well. Yet, global factors weigh on euro area growth. To be sure, there are tentative signs of stabilization. Forward-looking indicators have become slightly more optimistic as the Purchasing Manager Index on manufacturing business expectations in 12 months' time have increased in 5 consecutive months through January to their highest levels in 18 months. Moreover, while uncertainties surrounding the global economic environment remain elevated, those related to trade tensions between the United States and China are receding. Other risks, however, are still lingering, or as for the uncertainty surrounding the impact of coronavirus, are a renewed source of concern. The overall moderate growth performance is delaying the pass-through from wage increases to prices and inflation developments. Inflation, measured by the flash harmonized index of consumer prices, stood at 1.4% in January, in line with our expectations and better than in the previous month. The euro area economy therefore continues to require support from our monetary policy, which provides a shield against global headwinds. We see that our policy stimulus is being passed on to the financing conditions most relevant to the real economy. According to the latest data, lending rates for businesses are almost 10 basis points lower than they were 1 year ago. And for households, for house purchases, they are almost 40 basis points lower and close to their historical lows. These favourable financing conditions in turn continue to support business investment and consumer and construction spending in the euro area, partially offsetting the negative impact from sluggish development in global demand. Now, at the same time, obviously, we continue to closely monitor the potential side effects of those measures. Low interest rates bring a lot of benefits to the euro area economy. That being said, low funding costs appear to have also encouraged more borrowing by highly leveraged firms and greater risk-taking by non-banks, such as investment funds, insurance companies, and pension funds. In addition, property markets in a number of euro area countries have seen persistently rising prices, although the low interest rate environment is only one among many factors influencing the choice to borrow for house purchases. In this environment, authorities should continue to use targeted macroprudential measures to address the associated risks to financial stability. At the same time, fiscal and structural policies also have an important role to play in a low interest rate environment. They can lift the growth momentum and boost potential through higher productivity growth. This would in turn support the effectiveness of our measures and also help interest rates to rise again in due course. Let me now turn to the topic of central bank communication. For those who observe central banks, you will agree with me that central banks have come a long way in how they communicate. Public institutions, including the ECB, have moved in the direction of disclosing more information and better explaining policy, also, by the way, in response to Parliament demands and public requests. This Parliament, your Parliament, has encouraged the ECB to follow this path from the very beginning. One of the topics chosen for the first Econ meeting in 1999 was the ECB's communication and transparency policy. So good communication forms the bedrock of the ECB's credibility and underpins our legitimacy in the eyes of the people that we serve. But as central bankers, it's also in our interest to communicate effectively. Being open and clear is essential to make our policy more effective. Carefully calibrated communication. Think, for instance, of forward guidance, which you have alluded to, actually, Madam Chair, has itself become a tool of central bank policy. Traditionally, as central bankers, we have become more comfortable speaking to experts and markets than to the general.
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Sheila from Birkdale writes, I arrived at yours with such excitement. You looked and smelled phenomenal. We drove to the beach. We found a secluded spot, and then after 5 minutes, you were all gone. Your 2 juicy patties, crisp lettuce, onions, cheese, and Big Mac sauce. Finished.
You can now spend even longer with the taste you love with the Grand Big Mac, but only until the 24th of March. Served after 11 a.m, subject to availability, participating restaurants only.
The Sky Broadband sale ends soon. Get a massive 30% off superfast broadband and anytime calls. It's now just £25 a month for 18 months, so you can stream, share, play or tweet in the living room, bedroom, hey, any room you like. It's usually £37 a month, but now it's just £25 a month for 18 months plus £19.95 setup. So what are you waiting for? Offer ends 6th of Feb. Visit sky.com today. Sky Fibre Network areas. Speeds vary by location. Prices may change during contract. Terms apply.
Good morning. This is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What sea sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
One-way street, with most effort spent on broadcasting messages. We are all focused on speaking. We love to speak and hear the sound of our own voice. But we need to be, at least, in my view, equally focused on listening to people. As US Chief Justice John Marshall observed already in the early 1800s, to listen well is as powerful as a means of communication as to talk well. Epictetus said something very similar way back, referring to the fact that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth and that we should use them appropriately and in due proportion. For that reason, a key element of our strategy review, but also more generally, will be to incorporate elements of listening into our framework on a structural basis. Clearly, the dialogue with this committee is already a core component. Beyond that, I'm looking forward to a series of listening events which we will launch as part of our strategy review. We will run these across the entire euro area together with our colleagues from the national central banks so that the entire euro system is included and that the dialogue is to be had in the national languages that are spoken by the people. We will be keen to hear the views of a wide range of stakeholders, including academics, financial sector representatives, civil society organizations, students, and a whole range of people of all categories. Our first such listening ECB event will take place here in Brussels in late March, where I hope to engage also with representatives of EU-level civil society organizations with a wide range of perspectives, and you will all indeed be invited to participate if you so wish. We will also have an online portal on the ECB website where all the information on the strategy review will be available for the general public and to the largest extent possible also in official languages. There's a lot of work that is already ongoing and that will see the publication of multiple papers. Through these channels, we aim to learn directly from civil society organizations and the people who represent them, and those who matter most to them, be that rising rents and house prices, on job uncertainty, on climate change, on digitalization. And we will assess how we can best take these concerns into account in our action and in our communication within the limits of our mandate. So, Madam Chair, honourable members, the review we have just started will be a thorough and intense process. Over the next 11 months, the dialogue between our institutions...
Christine Lagarde, ECB President, speaking to the European Parliament there, giving her thoughts on the Eurozone economy and also looking ahead to the strategic review by the ECB. Of course, earlier we'd had some comments from Lagarde on coronavirus and also just generally on monetary policy and some of the limits therein. Joining us to discuss, we have Frédéric Ducrozet from Pictet joining us down the line. Frédéric, great to have you with us. Frédéric is, of course, the strategist at Pictet Wealth Management, joining us live from Geneva. Your first take on what we heard from Lagarde there?
Well, sticking with the script, the strategy review will be indeed a very ambitious process lasting for the whole year. The impression that the ECB wants to give, and Mrs. Lagarde, starting with the president, of course, is that in the meantime, everything can happen. The policy stance is not on hold forever. There could be some changes, but still, in the meantime, everything can happen. The policy stance is not on hold forever. There could be some changes, but still, the impression we have is that despite this downside risk from the virus, the staff projection, the ECB's assessment of the economic situation is still valid, and there is a very high bar, in my view at least, for the ECB to make any change in the very near term. That's for once. What went in red in headline in the Bloomberg screen was that maybe something new at the beginning of her speech, saying that there is reduced scope for policy action from the ECB and other central banks. So I mean, on that note, I would say first, President Lagarde is mostly stating the obvious. It's true that the neutral rate of interest rates is low, that most central banks, including the ECB, of course, have gone closer to perhaps the limits of what they can do, what can be efficient. But it's still a change from, if you remember, President Draghi stance saying that there is no limit within the ECB mandate. Yeah. So I guess that's perhaps marginally more hawkish than what we had so far.
Okay, Frédéric, thanks very much for the moment. Stay with us. We're going to get far more on this, of course, and other issues in just a moment when we stick with Frédéric Ducrozet, strategist at Pictet Wealth Management.
Just to take a check on the markets, Roger, 35 minutes into the equity market open. I mean, really what you're seeing is resilience in risk on in today's session. A fourth day of gains for the Stock 600, up 0.4%. We're seeing green on the screen across pretty much all the European indices. This after US stocks hit a record yesterday, and futures point to more gains today on Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures. The 10-year Treasury yield higher by a basis point, 167 handle. We see the 10-year Bund yield edge up a basis point to negative 35 as well, even after disappointing Germany factory orders data, which can be quite a good forward-looking signal. In FX, the dollar yesterday went above its 200-day moving average for the first time since December, and it hit a 2020 high following the US ISM non-manufacturing data hitting a 5-month high. So optimism in markets perhaps lifted yesterday partly by the US data, but also on speculation about possible coronavirus vaccines, even though the WHO has pushed back on that. WTI and Brent also strongly bid on the prospect of OPEC Plus taking action to support the oil market.
Okay, let's make some of our top stories. Well, the health officials racing to develop a treatment for the new coronavirus that's devastating China are very much in play. The death toll has soared to more than 560, and more than 28,000 people are infected. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
China sacrifices a province to save the world. Today, day 14 since China locked down Hubei, marking the end of the incubation period for infection. Now, markets may be looking past all this, but everywhere in Hubei, scenes of chaos as residents cope with the world's biggest ever quarantine. Beijing has announced some steps to ease the pain on business, today cutting tariffs in half on $75 billion of U.S. imports. The race is on for a vaccine, but the WHO says that's a long way off. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
And in a rare step that shows how deeply the epidemic is impacting global commodity flows, China's biggest buyer of liquefied natural gas told some suppliers it won't take delivery of cargoes because of constraints caused by the coronavirus. And it's really interesting, Roger, because Bloomberg had a story just a few days ago saying that China is having to rethink everything from a potential force majeure on LNG deliveries, and we've sort of had some confirmation of that now, to, of course, rethinking its growth target for the year.
Okay, and in earnings news, Societe Generale is pledging to boost shareholder returns. That's as it shifts to a new cash dividend policy. That comes after the French lender warned investors to expect muted revenue growth. SocGen also signalling it's set to miss a key profitability target.
And HSBC is set to roll out its third overhaul in a decade. Chairman Mark Tucker is looking at job cuts, unit mergers, disposals and closures. Investors are getting frustrated. 2 post-crisis resets and Tucker's first pick as CEO all flopped.
Okay, let's get the latest now in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans looking at what's been happening on Capitol Hill, the end of impeachment.
Yes, good morning, Roger. President Trump faced impeachment day and he won. The Senate has cleared him of abuse of power and of obstructing Congress. Trump will get the chance to weigh in at his news conference today on Republican Mitt Romney's guilty vote for impeachment. Bloomberg's Bob Moon reports.
Even as Romney announced a vote that will prevent Trump from claiming only Democrats wanted him out, the one-time Republican choice for president was already bracing for the fallout. Romney's niece, Ronna McDaniel, chairs the Republican National Committee. She responded that she and the party stand with President Trump. That was no surprise to Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
There are a whole lot of Republicans, I believe, who knew we were right, but said, I don't want the bother of being attacked relentlessly by the president and the hard right.
Bob Moon, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
Crossing over to Turkey, where at least 3 people have died after a Boeing 737-800 split open after landing in Istanbul. 179 people were injured when the jet veered off the runway in wet weather. The rear of the plane caught fire. The front detached and came to rest upside down. In Germany, an unprecedented alliance with the far right has left Chancellor Angela Merkel's CDU in difficulties. Bloomberg's Chad Thomas reports.
Chancellor Merkel's Christian Democrats set off a firestorm after voting alongside the far-right Alternative for Germany to install a new leader in the eastern state of Thuringia. The move has provoked outrage from across the political spectrum in Germany and puts pressure on Merkel and her heir apparent Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer. AKK, as she is known, has disavowed the decision and urged Thuringia to hold a new election. Meanwhile, Merkel's junior coalition partner, the Social Democrats, say the move crossed a red line and called the maneuver political treachery. All this adds to the uncertainty already swirling around Germany's government. In Berlin, Chad Thomas, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we continue the conversation with Pictet's Frédéric Ducrozet. This is Bloomberg.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert. Filling in for Smokey, because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Hello, I'm here to tell you that age really does bring wisdom, and you may still have plenty to contribute. At Eisner-Amper, we're successful at helping business owners and entrepreneurs assess and plan for the future, as well as maximize where you are in the present. If you're curious about how to plan for both your professional and personal future, come and talk to us. I'm Lisa Stewart, principal in charge of the Center for Family Business Excellence, and I'd love to help you to find the right path forward. You can find us at eisneramper.com/family.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seized...
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Give mealtimes a makeover. Give it some gusto. Give it crispy chili haddock with pak choy noodles or smoky Spanish chicken from just £2.98 per plate. Give it more than 40 delicious recipes to choose from every week and all the ingredients you need for cooking at home. Give your hob a workout. Go on, give it some gusto. Visit gusto.co.uk today and get 50% off your first box. Subscription auto-renews, cancel anytime.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London, Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Bayless. Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And global stocks rose back within 1% of an all-time high on optimism. The global economy would weather the hit from the coronavirus, although the World Health Organization has said that no vaccine is in prospect, and that was a prospect that did seem to be changing markets in the last 24 hours. The WHO very much stepping down on that. But we also had some data out of the US that may have buoyed sentiment. This morning, of course, we got data from German factories. Demand fell 2.1% in December, down 8.7% from a year ago. But that doesn't seem to be having much effect on European stocks right now. Stock 600 up 0.4%, FTSE 100 up 0.2%, CAC up 0.7%, the DAX up 0.5%. And looking to the US Open, S&P at the moment 0.4% up, down, very much the same. Nasdaq up 0.5%. And looking across to commodities, WTI oil 51.76 is where we find that. That's up 2%, perhaps coming off the back of the discussions going on in OPEC Plus right now in Vienna. Brent crude 56, that's up 1.3%. And keeping an eye on the Treasury benchmark, 1.6681 is the handle we find that. And having a look at cable, the pound having a bit of a battering, 1.2985. That's down 0.1% against the dollar. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more of what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, thank you. In Italy, 2 people have been killed after a high-speed train derailed near the northern city of Lodi, emergency services say. Both of the dead are thought to be drivers. At least one person has suffered significant but not life-threatening injuries. The train was travelling from Milan to the south. Convicted scam artist Bernie Madoff says he's dying and he wants out of prison. Madoff has asked a federal judge to release him after serving just 10 years of his 150-year sentence. Madoff says he suffers from terminal kidney failure and other ailments. He defrauded investors of more than $19 billion in history's biggest Ponzi scheme. And people working some of the longest days in equity markets would actually like them to be shorter, a Bloomberg survey shows. Across Europe, 74% of finance professionals favoured reducing the 8.5-hour stock market day, which exceeds the US by 2 hours. The most popular response was to delay the opening time by an hour to 9 a.m. London time and bring forward the close by 30 minutes to 4 p.m. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Does that mean we'd be able to wake up later than 3 a.m.? Doubtful, I think.
Well, that's what I was hoping when I had a look at that. But what I said, 8.5-hour day, it doesn't seem that long. But when you look into it, they obviously have meetings before and after, and it's intense.
Exactly. All right. Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans with the World News. Now let's turn back to our top story. Lots of threads to try to tie together. China halving tariffs on $75 billion of imports from February 14th. It's part of the Phase 1 trade deal and comes at the same time as US tariffs on Chinese goods are set to be cut. It also comes amid concerns over the economic impact of coronavirus as the global death toll rises to 565. Frédéric Ducrozet, strategist at Pictet Wealth Management, is still with us. Frédéric, really appreciate you sticking around, so thank you for that. First of all, help me untangle what's happening in the equity and to some extent the bond market today as well. We've got equities in the green for a fourth day. Bond yields are rising. Now, I understand some of the risk sentiment was to do with optimism around the prospect of vaccines for coronavirus. The WHO has pushed back on that. We had some positive data out of the US. The tariff reduction is part of Phase 1. So to me, that's a little bit of a side issue that shouldn't necessarily be raising risk sentiment. And at the same time, we had the German factory orders that were disappointing. Is this a market that's jumping on any hint of good news and ignoring the bad news?
It looks like it is. Indeed, it's a perfect storm, really, because we went from almost full-blown panic at some point because you have no historic precedent. You don't know how to, benchmark this situation, compare it with previous episodes. Nothing is like it used to be in 2003, for instance. Everything in China is much more relevant to the world economy, etc. But it's essentially binary in the end. So either you get a V-shaped recovery, which seems like, still the baseline scenario, at least from a market perspective, where Q2 or at least the second half of this year will be much stronger than what we expected at the beginning of this year. So this is something that, once you recover the losses at the global level, of course, this is something that is really supportive for profits, equity market, risk assets in general. You have hopes that the situation stabilizes first and they will get a treatment eventually, even though the World Health Organization has to sound cautious. And you have this market that is reacting completely asymmetrically, only to good news, as you said. And I agree with you, the news on the Chinese tariffs were to be expected at some point. It's not news that we should factor in on top of everything we've had so far. But what we do have, and I would say despite the weak data this morning in Germany, is an unchanged underlying macro picture where the domestic economy in most areas of the world is still very resilient. We've seen this in the job market in the US yesterday. We've seen this also in terms of forward-leading indicator, including in the manufacturing sector earlier this week with the PMIs. I think, again, it's binary. If that's the baseline, if the market catches up and we are back to square one, then, if I may end on a more cautious note, the concern I hear from an investor's perspective is that this correction was actually too fast, too shallow, and that, we perhaps back to, as I said, square one, where the market was a bit overbought in some cases and valuation were demanding. So maybe it's good news for now, and then we have to be cautious again over the next few weeks.
All right, Frédéric. So we take on board your cautious optimism on the one hand, on the other hand. But let me perhaps we should drill down and look at certain areas. Now, one thing caught my eye was concern growing about the markets that depend on China most closely, the EM markets, EM currencies as well, and that may be where we should look for the problem. Also, potentially, I suppose, the economy is dependent on commodities because of the commodities effect. Is that a good way to read it?
Absolutely, because that's where you see really the extent of the demand issue. As I said, it's binary. I'm not 100% sure, of course, that we get to this V-shaped recovery, that we get over this virus and crisis without any damage. So that's an assumption, of course, to be absolutely clear. But it's not. We will see some collateral damage, side effect, and perhaps even a second leg of weakness in some selected EM markets. You're right, because they are directly affected by the virus and the crisis, but also to some extent won't benefit as much as China itself, of course, from any stimulus that we could see. We've seen the central bank stepping in. That's not something that helps directly the neighbor countries. We could see still some weakness in currencies and at least strength in the dollar relative to those countries, to those currencies, which is not helping. And again, at the end of the day, it all depends on the growth outlook. And if we're back to square one, then it's a mixed picture for some some countries in EM in particular. So you're right, I agree. We are cautiously optimistic on the global outlook and perhaps even more cautious on those selected EM markets.
Right. I wonder what that means for asset allocation in equities versus fixed income, Frederic. So a gauge of European credit risk has hit its lowest since 2011. That's one thing we should park right now. So risk assets rallying in terms of equities and credit, but also JP Morgan have cut their equities in their asset allocation because they say there's a significant chance of an unexpected reacceleration of new coronavirus cases as factories reopen in China. If the factories fail to reopen, the economic impact could prove much more severe. So they sort of see two bad scenarios there. Meantime, they boost corporate bonds to -5% from -7% in their allocation. Would you be preferring corporate debt over equities in risk assets, and would you be increasing to sovereign debt elsewhere in fixed income?
That's actually what we've done so far, even before the outbreak of the virus, having a relatively more positive view on European sovereign debt in particular. I think the political risk have diminished. Rightly or wrongly, by the way, we don't talk anymore about Italy, for instance. And again, that's very binary as well in terms of the market psychology. After we passed the election in Italy with no major rise in the populism threat or instability in the coalition, then you've seen this massive second leg of tightening in spreads, and that was something that we were positioned for. On your last note, yes, I agree as well that we could get a second leg of maybe increase in the number of infection cases and as people return to work, but I suspect that, again, depending on the macro data, the market will look through this because based on the assumption of a V-shaped recovery, and that's not something that is too big a concern to us. What is, on the other hand, to conclude, is we've seen this massive concentration in the sectors and actually top 5 stocks contributing to the performance so far this year. This is a concern also for us and for investors, that you could see a rotation again from the very strong performing growth style stocks and tech sector in particular to something that could be a bit more cyclical eventually this year again. And on this note, we like Europe as well. We like European small caps in some countries based on the idea that the recovery will gather trim. If I may, this morning's data in Germany was indeed very weak, but also very volatile and probably, sorry.
Yeah, I would say a difficult moment for German data, definitely, Frederic. We're running out of time, unfortunately. Frederic Ducrozet, strategist at Pictet Wealth Management, thank you so much for being with us and indeed staying with us through much of the last half hour. This is Bloomberg.
Witham offers private equity expertise to address...
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
What we're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility.
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And from Bloomberg's Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
We check the data every 15 minutes here on Bloomberg Radio, so let's do that right now, Matt. We've got a positive session underway for European equities. Once again, risk on. US futures continue to point higher as well. So the Stock 600 up by 0.4%. The CAC 40 up by 0.7%. The DAX up by 0.6%. The FTSE 100 up by 0.3%. So all of those firmly in positive territory. US futures point higher by between 4 and 0.6% this morning. This follows on from a really strong session coming through in Asia. The MSCI Asia Pacific up by 1.8% by the close. Global stocks near all-time highs. European stocks touching a new high during the European session. And what is leading us there? Well, we've got some earnings stories, of course, to focus on. And the banking sector is to the top of the GRR screen, which, of course, ranks the various sectors on the Bloomberg. So banks up by 2% today. Autos and parts bouncing, as is the travel and leisure sector. So we're really seeing some of those sectors that have been beaten up by concerns around the coronavirus. Some of those bouncing quite substantially today. Travel and leisure and autos both up by more than 1%. Utilities to the downside. The healthcare sector to the downside, so it's those sort of bond proxy sectors that maybe had benefited recently, those haven trades that had benefited recently that seem to be selling off. Is this then, this risk on move, is this complacency from investors, or is this very well contextualized assessment of risk, a balance of the role of China versus the role of the US and the data we got out of the US on services and jobs? All of that looked positive. And some of the measures being taken by China lifting risk appetite as well, dropping tariffs, dropping taxes in some cases as well. We'll return to those themes during the programme. Quick check of some other assets for you. Oil prices firmer as well this morning. So in keeping with that risk on move, we are at $56 a barrel on Brent, 51.78 on WTI. The yield on the US 10-year 1.666%, and the dollar fairly flat this morning. We saw some movement in the pound to the downside, 129.84, down by around 0.1%. Matt?
All right, now let's get into the ECB, because we just came off of a speech from Christine Lagarde in European Parliament. She told lawmakers in Brussels, she said, a decade of crisis fighting has left policymakers with few options for more monetary stimulus. Not groundbreaking, but stuff, but very interesting to hear from the ECB president. Just as we face concerns from the coronavirus that add to trade tensions. Let's welcome our Bloomberg panel this morning. Opinion columnist Marcus Ashworth joins us in London, as well as David Powell, European economist at Bloomberg Economics. Marcus, first off, was there anything to trade on out of Lagarde's speech today?
Not really. I'm slightly surprised she made that statement that there isn't too much more than the ECB could do. I don't think that's what she really means. It's perhaps a sort of poor headline. What she says to the European Parliament is not really what she's going to say into the press and indeed the markets at the regular monthly meetings. So in that sense, I think we perhaps shouldn't overreact here, and I don't think the markets certainly have. But it's a little of perhaps, I think she's trying to get the message across. She's been beating on this drum ad nauseum, which is that it's all about fiscal policy. You know, don't rely on monetary policy anymore as much as you were able to. It's a very low inflation environment, therefore it's very low rates. What more flexibility do we have? Therefore we need to shift to fiscal policy. It's been her big thing, will continue to be a big thing. So I don't think the markets are reading too much into it.
Good morning to you, Marcus. Yeah, interesting that she spent quite a lot of time talking about communication, didn't she? And about
a lot of time.
And she clearly thinks there's work to be done to make sure the messages are getting through, not just to the market, but to the people on the street. And she suggests that the efficacy of central bank policy is reduced if the citizens of the Eurozone don't understand the path forward. I suppose, is this difficult for markets to work out who she's talking to sometimes?
Well, it says that the markets are getting the message that she's not talking to them, and she wants to reach beyond and get the touchy-feely stuff going. And then, look, I don't have much time for that stuff. I don't think so, what a central bank president should be done. She's not a politician. She should be focusing on nice, boring things.
But doesn't forward guidance require her to speak to
forward misguidance residents? Is what we normally get.
Okay.
David, what do you think? I mean, as an economist, it does seem, I don't want to say wacky, but that's the only word I'm coming up with right now, to sit there and wax rhapsodic about communication with the average Joe all day in front of, I mean, does it matter?
Yeah, well, the average Joe, after all, is the person who goes out to the store each day and buys things, and who has to make purchases such as cars and TVs. So what they think about the economy, what they think about inflation, etc., that's certainly going to have an impact. And, you know, she's really focused, as we know from the last couple of press conferences, on the content of the strategic review, which has just begun. And a big aspect of that is communications. How do we communicate a variety of things, even particularly what they are and aren't able to do. And that's one of the reasons that they are thinking of changing the inflation target to 2% from 1.9%. As the former executive board member Benoit Cœuré said in December, just before he stepped down, that when you say the target is 1.9%, you give this false impression that the ECB can control inflation to the decimal point. So that they're doing a lot of soul searching, and communication is certainly part of that, because they need to influence the way Europeans think.
I thought it was interesting that she pointed out how few Europeans really know. Maybe they've heard of the ECB, but they don't really know what it does. And I thought maybe she should be careful what she wishes for, because being well known as a central bank might not be always what you want. Depends what you're well known for. Let me ask you more about this inflation goal, then, David. I mean, do you see a band of tolerance emerging around this goal, or what? I don't want to prejudge the end of the review. It's going to take us months to get there, but let's try prejudge it.
I think what's almost become a foregone conclusion at this stage, that the ECB will make a small change in its inflation target. Right now it says below but close to 2%, which the market widely interprets as meaning 1.9%. And they'll probably increase that to 2%. It's just an easier thing to communicate. It has that advantage of not being so precise as that 1.9%. And it's also in line with international practice that we see at other large central banks in the United States, the United Kingdom. So that's something that's not going to be that difficult to get through. The more difficult options are the more kind of out there ideas of bans and things like that. And from what we know so far, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of support from the Governing Council for those things, but they have been very tight-lipped. Supposedly, Lagarde has asked them to refrain from making too many comments in the strategic review so far, so we don't really know what they're thinking, but those kind of more out there ideas.
If they're never going to get there anyway, it seems like an inflation target is less important, right? I mean, you could say it 50% if you want. I mean, if you're never going to get past 1.7, it doesn't matter. Marcus, what do you think the ECB needs to do?
Well, oh God, where do I start on that one?
What would your advice be to Christine Lagarde, Marcus?
Well, really, I appreciate what she's trying to do, which is that they are reacting to a lot of criticisms now, particularly from the German newspapers, against Draghi, and she's trying to create a break from that and become more fluffy and welcoming and more relevant, particularly on things like climate change, which she mentioned an awful lot, and explain, perhaps, as David put quite eloquently there, I think, that this is part of everyone's life, and what relevance does ECB have, rather than some very complicated, very technical sounding stuff we always get out of it, for only those people that care. So I see where she's coming from, and perhaps that's a good thing to do. But this review, if it's going to take a year, and all it does is change something from below and close to 2%, it is an utter waste of time. Nonetheless, we have a new chief economist in Philip Lane, who is very much on Lagarde's side here, and they want to try and create a new move, and there are a few things they're going to do, for instance, including or increasing the amount of housing in the inflation target. That's something which could be a subtle way of effectively pushing inflation up. It may restrict them a little bit in the future because, by definition, if mortgage rates go up, as rates go up, it's going to create inflation, which is therefore going to make it harder for them to manoeuvre. But I'm sure they'll get around it with a little bit of flexibility, which they really ought to include rather than having a rigid 2%. It needs to be a little bit more flexible. I'm sure they've got a lot more to go. But, for the moment, the markets are sort of looking at this slightly bemused because what does it really mean for where things are at the moment, and particularly with QE having started again at 20 billion a month? Probably not a lot.
Okay, thank you both very much. Opinion columnist Marcus Ashworth there, and David Powell, European economist at Bloomberg Economics.
Let's get over now to Leanne Gerrans for your global news headlines. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt. The death toll from the coronavirus has soared to over 560. Now over 28,000 people are infected. Some cities in China are grappling with the modern world's largest ever lockdown. Usually busy streets sit nearly empty. Hong Kong now says it will quarantine all arrivals from mainland China. In the US, President Trump has been acquitted in his impeachment trial. He was cleared of the charges of abusing power and obstructing Congress. Utah Senator Mitt Romney was the only Republican to break ranks. He cleared the president of the obstruction charge but voted to find Trump guilty of abusing power. Chief Justice John Roberts made the announcement.
It is therefore ordered and adjudged that the said Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby, acquitted of the charges in said articles.
Meanwhile, sticking with U.S. politics, the Iowa Democratic Party have released more results from Monday's caucus. Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg are virtually tied in the Iowa caucus with 97% of precincts reporting. Let's cross over to Turkey, where at least 3 people have died after a Boeing 737-800 split open after landing in Istanbul. 179 people were injured when the jet veered off the runway in wet weather. The rear of the plane caught fire. The front detached and came to rest upside down. And Hollywood legend Kirk Douglas has died aged 103, starring in more than 80 movies across 7 decades. He is perhaps best known for Spartacus. Let's hear a clip from that iconic movie.
I'm Spartacus! 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 I'm Spartacus!
Banned during McCarthyism return back to Hollywood. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Classic part of that film. Thanks very much, Leanne. Now with the morning sports news, here's Colin Besley.
Tottenham can look forward to a home tie with Norwich in the last 16 of the FA Cup. They needed an 87th minute penalty from Heung-min Son to edge Southampton 3-2 in their 4th round replay in North London. Spurs boss Jose Mourinho says it was a struggle to put the team together, knowing the likes of Dele Alli couldn't play 90 minutes.
It's like when you have a blanket in your bed and you push the blanket and the feet are out, and then you have cold in your feet and cover the feet, and then half of your body is outside the blanket. That's us. But amazing spirit.
England Rugby Union forwards coach Matt Proudfoot feels Tom Curry brings balance to the national team's back row. Eddie Jones chose to name a team without a specialist number 8 against France in their Six Nations opener, with the Sale flanker playing in that position. Their coach will announce his squad for Saturday's clash with Scotland this morning. And champions St Helens attempt to make it 2 wins from as many matches at the start of the new Rugby League Super League season tonight. They open their campaign with a 48-8 thrashing of Salford last week.
All right, that is your European sports roundup. Still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we'll discuss a potential new crisis in German politics as a local chapter of Angela Merkel's CDU party votes for a candidate that then the far-right party also voted for later. Bloomberg Opinion's Andreas Kluth tells us why this is such a huge firestorm in German politics. This is Bloomberg.
Message and data rate may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with The Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs on Bloomberg Markets.
I want to continue to look at the impact that the virus is having on the global economy. To do this, we are joined by Blackstone Managing Director and Chief Investment Strategist Joe Zeidel. Very interesting perspective that you have relative to one of our previous guests who seemed to be a little bit bearish on the economy. Walk me through some of the impacts that you see from the coronavirus on U.S. and international markets.
Before we talk about the impact of coronavirus, we do want to express our sympathy, for everybody who's been affected by the coronavirus directly, as well as everybody who's been impacted by the quarantines. It's something that we continue to watch very, very closely, of course, because of the huge human toll that it's taking. That said, my role as an investment strategist is to think about the markets and the economic impact that the spread of the coronavirus could have on the Chinese economy and the global economy in general. And what I would say is this was a critically important week for Chinese policymakers, and the decision to reopen the equity markets when they did, the decisions to cut rates and introduce stimulus into the economy, both fiscal and monetary stimulus, gave global investors a degree of confidence that the Chinese policymakers had at least taken the worst case scenario off the table.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European equities this morning on the US Stock 600 gained 0.4%, also 0.3% higher on the FTSE 100. So despite the continued concerns about coronavirus, the difficulty of finding a treatment, according to the World Health Organization, and Beijing cutting tariffs on some US imports, we still see positivity here in Europe. Mainly that's because we're in earnings season. For example, ArcelorMittal sees a better outlook in terms of steel production, saying that the coronavirus outbreak in China will only be felt in the short term. So that's one stock doing particularly well, gaining almost 10 full percentage points this morning. We've also had Societe Generale earnings and Unicredit too. So quite a number of banks to digest. In terms of other data, weaken the forecast German factory order data, though perhaps the worst of it this morning. In terms of US benchmark benchmark yields, we traded 1.65%. So we're still heading higher for yields both in the US and in Europe. Negative 34 basis points for German Bund yields, up by a basis point. Looking ahead to the US market open, S&P 500 futures up by almost 0.4%. And in the oil markets, as we have another day, third day, surprisingly, of OPEC Plus countries meeting in Vienna, WTI crude gains 1.4%, trading at $51.45 the barrel. Brent crude at $55.74. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gaines with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Countries around the world are taking more steps to contain the coronavirus outbreak. India is the latest to impose restrictions on travellers from China. It says existing visas are no longer valid for any foreigners coming from the mainland. Meanwhile, the death toll in China is now over 563. There are more than 28,000 confirmed cases of the virus. The government is pursuing an early trade deal with Australia's Prime Minister Boris Johnson seeks to deliver on his promise of a post-Brexit economic boost. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab is in Canberra today, kicking off an Asian tour that will include visits to Japan, Singapore and Malaysia. Trade between the UK and Australia was worth £18.3 billion last year. And Bernie Madoff has asked for early release from his 150-year prison sentence. 81 years old, he says he's suffering from terminal kidney failure and has 18 months left to live. He famously defrauded investors of more than $19 billion in history's biggest Ponzi scheme. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gaines. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Andreas Kluth, who's writing about an unprecedented, and I'll say in quotes, alliance, unquote, that has provoked outrage in Germany. So it's a fairly complicated issue, Andreas. It's not really an alliance per se. A guy from the FDP ran for office. The CDU, Angela Merkel's party, supported him. And then after that, the AfD, the far-right party that's so powerful in these eastern states, pushed him over the line with their votes. So everyone's angry because nobody wants to do something with the support of this far-right AfD, right?
That's absolutely right. So this was in one of the 16 states, Thuringia, formerly in East Germany.
One of my favorites, by the way.
Thuringia, the state.
As a motorcycle rider, it's gorgeous.
Oh, I'm sure as that. Yeah. Usually it's peripheral in politics, shall we say. It's very East German in the sense that the two largest parties are the left, which is the former East German Communist Party, and the right, which is this Alternative for Germany, this populist party that you mentioned. What happened yesterday was completely above board constitutionally. They had to, the new parliament had to elect a new prime minister, and they couldn't. And in the third round, a third candidate came in from the smallest party in the government. That happened. That's the Free Democrats. And the Alternative for Germany, the far-right party, switched their support for tactical reasons, for no other reasons, and that brought this guy over the line. And immediately there was a nationwide outcry, and basically, I assure you, he won't stay in that office for long.
It was global outcry. Anna, because AKK, the leader of the CDU party, she was in, I think, Strasbourg, which is not Germany now, and Angela Merkel was in, I believe, South Africa, right?
Right, so they were in far-flung places.
Yeah.
But just for those who are not in Germany, explain, Andreas, the significance of this a little more, because it does seem strange that the CDU could feel bad about backing somebody before the AfD switched sides and gave their support. Why does this reflect so badly on the CDU? Clearly, the far right and German history there is in some sense the answer.
Yeah, there's several perspectives. First of all, today everyone here is hyperventilating and talking about the Weimar Republic. You're hearing that a lot because in the Weimar Republic, the extremes on the left and right, but then especially on the right, were normalized until they eventually took over. I assure you nothing of the sort is going to happen here. For the Christian Democrats, it's also interesting because, as you said, the National Party organization led by AKK, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, had told her branch in Thuringia, don't do this, don't play any of these games. And they went against her. So it a little bit raises an issue who's calling the shots, but she will call the shots.
The unspoken thought here, Anna, is that the CDU knew, people are thinking, the CDU knew that the AFD was going to jump in and support them. It's not like we're saying they actively conspired with the AFD or that they didn't, but it's fairly clear to a lot of onlookers that the CDU was aware this was going to happen. The CDU head of Thuringia, Mike Mooring, knew this was going to happen, and AKK said, don't do this, dude, and he still did it.
That's well put.
And but just to because we don't have a lot of time left, but Andreas, your take is that this is going to be turned around.
This is going to work out fine, because what's going to happen is this guy who got elected to his own surprise has no one to govern with. If the whole country is calling for either a new vote in Parliament or a new election for a new Parliament, and this will happen as just a question of time. And I think now everyone's woken up and said, look, this makes us look bad, and we don't want to talk about is this Weimar or not anymore, and we're going to vote for the right guys next time, and I think it's going to be fine.
Now they're all woke. Andreas, thanks so much for joining us. Andreas Kluth is a Bloomberg opinion columnist. You can get his work by typing OPIN-GO on the Bloomberg terminal. When we come back, we're going to get back to the top issues of trade and the coronavirus. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Hedge fund billionaire Steve Cohen is said to be ending talks to buy the New York Mets, walking away from a deal that some fans had hoped would give new life to the franchise. Cohen was in advanced negotiations to buy 80% of the Major League Baseball team at a league record valuation of $2.6 billion. According to the New York Post, the deal fell through because the current Mets owners, the Wilpons, changed the terms at a late stage. The Chicago Cubs must face, for now, a sports psychology author's lawsuit alleging a Cubs employee retweeted copyrighted material from his book. According to an Illinois federal court, the team may be able to evade the infringement suit if it can establish that a retweet isn't a copy. The case hinges on a gray area in the law that might permit widespread sharing of copyright-protected material online as long as the person sharing didn't create a distinct copy on a server. And that is the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the chief revenue officer of the New York Mets, this means overseeing complex operations, key financial drivers, and interpreting data to make critical decisions every day.
How is your business managing complexity? Cohn Resnick can help you improve performance through an integrated business planning strategy that optimizes your data, streamlines processes, and keeps you ahead of the competition. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
Why has JD Power?
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Having to deal with financial stuff can make you feel... ah! But at Money Supermarket, we make you feel... ah. That's because we go further to help you get money car. We don't just compare. We cut prices to help you get better car insurance deals. Get money car. Money Supermarket.
Welcome aboard Europe's 169th safest airline.
You were like my 169th biggest crush in school.
Your total body age is 169.
The number 169 never screamed glamour until now. Get the Toyota Aygo X-Play for only £169 deposit, then £169 a month with 0% APR representative. Just go. Aygo.
0% APR representative on new sales of Aygo X-Play over 48 months. £169 per month. Customer deposit of £169 when proposed and approved via Access Toyota by 31st of March 2020. £3,311.25p optional final payment. Subject to status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What sea sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
Welcome to Cathay Island. We hope you've enjoyed flying Cathay Airways. Oh, and Cathay, congratulations on the Euro Millions win.
This Friday's Euro Millions is a massive £105 million super jackpot. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing.
And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio. To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning. From the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. So European equity markets, Matt, take us through the details here. We've got stocks rallying on Chinese tariff cuts to come just in time for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the good news is if you're long anything and you need cash for dinner. By the way, I've lived in London before. I lived in London for 3 years, about 20 years ago, and it is super expensive to take a girl out on Valentine's Day, or a guy, depending whatever you're into. I feel like they double the prices. It's like a set menu.
I never do it. Make a policy of never doing it. Do it on another night. It's much more fun.
I feel like it's a good night to cook in, but when I lived there, of course, I couldn't cook.
I agree.
But now I've got a couple of dishes under my belt. In any case, if you're long, you can afford it because equity indexes have hit all new record highs today. Don't worry about the trade war or Brexit or the coronavirus because we are looking at the DAX was at one point 13,600. Now they've come off their highs a little. We're still up, though, 0.5% on the DAX and the CAC. The FTSE is back down to unchanged right now, 74.85. So the FTSE had been making more headway earlier in the session. It's slowed down a bit, but we still have U.S. futures also that are pointing higher, 0.4% higher for Dow and NASDAQ futures, about 0.3% higher for S&P 500 minis. So the news that China is going to cut some tariffs in half, and I think also, Anna, from yesterday, these headlines all around the place, some questionable developments on the possibility of medicines to treat or stop the coronavirus really got this market into rally mode. Taking a look at the other risk indicators, we see the 10-year yield climbed back up right now, 1.6543%. The yen is 109.8, the pound at 129.95. These currencies haven't moved in months, and the euro hasn't either at 110.05. But oil right now 55.62. That's the Brent crude quote, and I'll give you the NYMEX quote. WTI right now trading for 51.37 a barrel.
Okay, that's let's pick up on one of the themes Matt was talking about there, and that is around the coronavirus. Trade and China is halving tariffs on $75 billion of imports from February the 14th. It's part of a phase one trade deal and comes at the same time as US tariffs on Chinese goods are set to be cut. It also comes, of course, amid concerns over the economic impact of coronavirus as the global death toll rises to 565. For more, let's go live to Hong Kong, where Bloomberg's Stephen Engel is standing by. Stephen, it seems like China is still able to live up to these commitments in the phase one trade deal. It's interesting to see how these two things are going to rub up against each other, the commitments made under phase one and the current reality of the virus.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, China, of course, is hoping for some U.S. flexibility because of the outbreak of the virus. And there is a clause in that phase one deal where I understand that the two sides should consult each other in the event of a natural disaster or other unforeseeable event. So the coronavirus definitely an unforeseeable event, as it has really taken over most of our attentions over the last couple of weeks. But again, you know, the market's shrugging it off today, seeing this news from China to have the tariffs on some $75 billion of the imports from the U.S. Later this month as really a positive sign. The Hang Seng Index up the most in 5 months, 2.64% up. And it basically is a positive in what has been a very negative couple of weeks here.
Are you feeling it any less today, Stephen? I mean, in the great mask debate goes on, are there more people out on the streets doing stuff?
Well, I'm up in the new territories. I'm kind of up in the countryside, but it's interesting that you asked that because I just went on a long walk with my dog, and we did not wear masks. And interestingly, everybody out in these villages are out and about and out of their house. I think cabin fever has definitely sunk in. People are out with their dogs, and many people outside, at least, not wearing masks. But not wearing masks on the MTR, the subway system here, not wearing a mask in the shopping malls is definitely frowned upon, and you will be given an earful if you're not wearing your mask out in public.
Yeah, the politics of mask wearing is fascinating, isn't it? Because our colleagues in Singapore telling us that they, to try and preserve stores of masks, they're asking only people who are ill to wear them. So it's really interesting to.
Well, even though you don't know if you're ill until 2 weeks after you got the virus.
Well, indeed, and then if you do you want to brand yourself in that way? Anyway, that is an interesting one for sociologists to mull over, perhaps after we pass.
Can I just put in my 2 cents here, Anna? Sure. It's not needed, I'm sure, but there's this great argument about whether or not the masks keep you safe. And I think it doesn't matter. The point is the masks, everyone agrees, stop people who are ill from spreading the virus more virulently. And so, since no one knows if he or she is sick, it would make sense that everyone should wear a mask.
Unless you're facing limited supplies, and then I suppose you have to come up with a different policy. Yes. But let me just get to Stephen on this last point, which is around treatment. The markets were moving a lot on hopes for treatment yesterday, but maybe they were just hopes, as the WHO has sort of poured cold water on.
Well, I kind of poured cold water on that 24 hours ago when I was on Bloomberg Radio with you guys yesterday. I said most scientists that we've been speaking to and, virologists are saying that it takes months, if not years, for a vaccine. Yes, they could come up perhaps with some antiviral procedures or medications, which many are. But again, even the World Health Organization is saying there's no proven effective therapeutics at this point. So we can get our hopes up, and we do, because we want a quick solution to this, but it's a long game. I mean, keep in mind, there is no vaccine for SARS yet, and that was 17 years ago.
Yep, Stephen, you did make that point yesterday. I remember it well. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel joining us from Hong Kong, staying safe as he walks his dog in the countryside. Thank you very much.
All right, let's get to Leanne Gerrans now with your global news headlines. Leanne?
Matt, good morning. President Trump faced impeachment day and won. The Senate has cleared him of abuse of power and of obstructing Congress. Trump will get the chance to weigh in at his news conference. That's later today on Republican Mitt Romney's guilty vote for impeachment. Bloomberg's Bob Moon reports.
Even as Romney announced a vote that will prevent Trump from claiming only Democrats wanted him out, the one-time Republican choice for president was already bracing for the fallout. Romney's niece, Ronna McDaniel, chairs the Republican National Committee. She responded that she and the party stand with President Trump. That was no surprise to Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
There are a whole lot of Republicans, I believe, who knew we were right, but said, I don't want the bother of being attacked relentlessly by the president and the hard right.
Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Crossing over to Turkey, where at least 3 people have died after a Boeing 737-800 split open after landing in Istanbul. 179 people were injured when the jet veered off the runway in wet weather. The rear of the plane caught fire, the front detached and came to rest upside down. In Germany, an unprecedented alliance with the far right has left Chancellor Angela Merkel's CDU in difficulties. Bloomberg's Chad Thomas reports.
Chancellor Merkel's Christian Democrats set off a firestorm after voting alongside the far-right Alternative for Germany to install a new leader in the eastern state of Thuringia. The move has provoked outrage from across the political spectrum in Germany and puts pressure on Merkel and her heir apparent Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer. AKK, as she is known, has disavowed the decision and urged Thuringia to hold a new election. Meanwhile, Merkel's junior coalition partner, the Social Democrats, say the move crossed a red line and called the maneuver political treachery. All this adds to the uncertainty already swirling around Germany's government. In Berlin, Chad Thomas, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
And Hollywood legend Kirk Douglas has died age 103, starring in more than 80 movies across 7 decades. He is perhaps best known for Spartacus. As producer, he hired blacklisted screenwriter Dalton Trumbo. The move was instrumental in letting filmmakers banned during McCarthyism return back to Hollywood. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Now with your morning sports news, here's Colin Besley.
Tottenham can look forward to a home tie with Norwich in the last 16 of the FA Cup. They needed an 87th minute penalty from Heung-min Son to edge Southampton 3-2 in their 4th round replay in North London. Spurs boss Jose Mourinho says it was a struggle to put the team together, then the likes of Dele Alli couldn't play 90 minutes.
It's like when you have a blanket in your bed and you push the blanket and the feet are out, and then you have cold in your feet and cover the feet, and then half of your body is outside the blanket. That's us. But amazing spirit.
England Rugby Union forwards coach Matt Proudfoot feels Tom Curry brings balance to the national team's back row. Eddie Jones chose to name a team without a specialist number 8 against France in their Six Nations opener, with the Sale flanker playing in that position. Their coach will announce his squad for Saturday's clash with Scotland this morning. And champions St Helens attempt to make it 2 wins from as many matches at the start of the new Rugby League Super League season tonight. They open their campaign with a 48-8 thrashing of Salford last week.
Thrashing. All right, your European sports roundup there. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Peter Garnery, head of equity strategy at Saxo Bank, joins us. We're going to get his take on earnings season. Ton of earnings in this morning. And last night's plunge in Tesla shares. This is Bloomberg.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
IBKR is the professional's gateway to the world's market. IBKR offers commissions starting at $0 for U.S.-listed stocks and ETFs, enhanced price execution via IB Smart Routing, and access to our powerful trader workstation, web, mobile, and API trading platforms. In addition, our clients enjoy the lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, fixed income, and more on over 125 markets in 31 countries. Learn more or open an IBKR integrated investment account at IBKR.com.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Asset management.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are, or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Welcome to Cathay Island. We hope you've enjoyed flying Cathay Airways. Oh, and Cathay, congratulations on the Euro Millions win.
This Friday's Euro Millions is a massive £105 million super jackpot. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing.
And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA On Demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hebker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So some optimism in the markets, it would seem, as Beijing says that it will cut tariffs on some US imports from February. And also, perhaps there's the thought that the coronavirus, although we see continued cases increase and deaths increase, that perhaps actually China may be able to contain the virus. US Stoxx 600 currently up by 0.2%, FTSE 100 also higher, a similar amount, as we also have had quite a slew of earnings out this morning. In terms of the big gainers, ArcelorMittal up by 9.3% this morning. UniCredit also getting a bump higher after their results, 5.8% higher for UniCredit. Looking to the US market open, NASDAQ yesterday, of course, closing at a record high. S&P 500 futures up by 0.25% now. In terms of the bond markets, in Europe, we have German yields at negative 34 basis points, so heading higher in terms of yields, up a basis point, as US yields trade at 1.65%. This is we see the continued meeting of OPEC Plus countries in Vienna to try to think about possibly an increase in the production cuts, some wrangling there between Russia and Saudi Arabia. WTI crude oil up by 1.1% now, trading at $51.34. Brent crude at $55.61. Bloomberg dollar spot index is flat. The pound down 0.25%. The euro trades at 109. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Good morning, Caroline. Scotland's Finance Secretary has resigned after reports he sent hundreds of messages to a 16-year-old boy he'd met online. Derek Mackay was just hours away from delivering the Scottish Government's annual budget. He's apologised after some of the messages were published in the Scottish Sun this morning. Convicted scam artist Bernie Madoff says he's dying and he wants out of prison. Madoff has asked a federal judge to release him after serving just 10 years of his 150-year sentence. Madoff says he's suffering from terminal kidney failure and other ailments. He defrauded investors of more than $19 billion in history's biggest Ponzi scheme. And people working some of the longest hours in equity markets would like them to be shorter. A Bloomberg survey shows across Europe, 74% of finance professionals favour reducing the 8.5-hour stock market day, which exceeds the US by 2 hours. The most popular response was to delay the opening time by an hour to 9 a.m. London time and bring forward the close by 30 minutes to 4 p.m. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
I gotta say, it makes sense to. I mean, the NYSE doesn't open until 9:30. The bell doesn't.
But I was just thinking, 8.5-hour day doesn't seem that long.
But it's what you have to do before and after.
Exactly, that's exactly what I was just reading. You have to have meetings before and after, and it does make your day long and intense.
Yeah, the traders. I mean, the boys at the NYSE get there, 6:30, so 3 hours.
And the girls, Matt, I'm sure.
Lots of girls, yes.
That is true, and I wish there were more. But there's only a handful of women on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Maybe that's why it's such an antiquated. Some people think of it as such an antiquated institution. In any case, Leanne Gerrans, thank you very much for the global news headlines there. Let's get over to the United States of America. Nathan Hager is standing by in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Been up since about 2:30 this morning.
What have you got planned for us?
Well, we do have signs of follow-through from China on the Phase 1 trade deal. Beijing saying it's going to cut tariffs in half on a big chunk of U.S. imports, and that is adding to the lift we are seeing in markets after yesterday's record close for the S&P 500. We're going to have the latest on that, plus efforts to contain the coronavirus. Some of the positive sentiment there also adding to market positivity. And we are going to look at the political state of play. A close look at that this morning. President Trump is planning to deliver remarks this afternoon at noon, Wall Street time, following what he calls total vindication from the impeachment vote in the Senate, despite that one vote from Mitt Romney lining up with the Democrats. We're going to take a look at that with Brown University political science chair Wendy Schiller. She's going to be with us this morning, along with John Hudak of the Brookings Institution, taking a look at where things stand now as we look toward the 2020 election. Stay with us for all that coming up here with me and Karen Moscow on Bloomberg Daybreak. Matt.
Looking forward to it. If you're listening on Sirius XM, good morning to you. You will hear Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow out of the U.S. next. If you're listening on London DAB, digital radio in the city, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Let's talk about the car sector. Elon Musk's fortunes hit a speed bump as Tesla shares dropped 17% yesterday after an epic 6-day rally. And according to our next guest, Tesla's earlier rally had detached the firm from any meaningful fundamentals. For more, we're joined by Peter Garnry, who is head of equity strategy at Saxo Bank. Peter, very good to speak to you. So we say his fortunes hit a roadblock or a speed bump, but of course, let's not forget the strong rally that we've seen in Tesla's shares. What did we start? I'm just looking at where we started the year. Around 650. We started the year around 420, and now we are trading around $730 a share. So that's not bad. But why is it that this is not able to be valued on fundamentals, do you think?
Well, there is some fundamental support. It's still a very aggressive valuation. I mean, we're looking at a company generating around $1 billion in free cash flow over the past 12 months, and still have a pretty decent growth rate on the top line, and producing the cars that most major governments in the world would like to see. So they still have the lead in what is going to be the transformation in the overall car industry. So it looks good. It's just they basically just still priced for perfection, and there was a lot of microstructure flow. Shorts being covering their short positions, basically leading to this ramp up. It had a very technical character, so that's why you saw that divergence away from the fundamentals. But the overall long-term case has improved for Tesla. It has shown that it can be profitable at a lower production level than initially thought. Panasonic is also surprised with their result lately, saying that the Gigafactory in Nevada is running at a surplus at a much lower production level than initially thought. So there has been a lot of tailwind. They're coming out. They're already producing the Model Y, which I think will have a more significant demand pickup than the Model X, which was really have essentially a too high price point to really be a big mover for Tesla. So I think it will be a very important year, 2020 for Tesla. But where it all ends on the price, we don't know. We can just say that it's basically almost priced for pure perfection on execution. And then, as you know, just with the latest from Ford, execution in the car industry is very difficult.
Peter, there was a time, I've been following this company since I first drove the Roadster, which was, I thought, a pretty cool experience in a little Lotus body. There was a time when everyone thought that another car maker would buy Tesla, and then, well, now they're way too expensive for anybody, but I guess Toyota could trade their entire company for Tesla. Then there was a time when everyone thought, well, still, I think people think that the big car makers are going to catch up and just knock them out because they have so much to spend. Is Tesla beyond that? Have they gotten beyond the point where Volkswagen is going to be able to, throw out 50 billion euros and just take their business?
It's still one of the key risks, and the way we view the car industry landscape, we think Volkswagen is, for now, the only one that is truly committed and it does pose as the biggest threat to Tesla. They have the financial muscles. They are building an EV infrastructure around one platform that can then be extended in different sizes, and then you just put a chassis on top of it. I think Volkswagen is doing the right thing. I think it looks like BMW and Daimler is not really keen to cut short-term profits to arguably go towards what will be the future. You have Toyota and other of the Asian players that are more in the hybrid space, which we think is not really the way to go. So Volkswagen poses the biggest risk, and Tesla has right now the lead. And I think also some car expert analysts have been quite surprised how complicated it is actually to set up an electrical vehicle production because of the battery supply chain. It has taken a longer time than I think most people had expected, because why is Volkswagen not producing hundreds of thousands of EVs already? It is because it's not that easy.
And it's certainly taking it did take a long time for Tesla to get things right, exactly. I suppose. What about, this tells us, just briefly, I guess, Peter, this tells us a lot about the market's appetite for pure play electric vehicles, and maybe that's what we find out through this whole thing. There's a lack of places to put that money, if that's how you want to express it.
Yes, I totally agree. And we also came out with a green climate basket of potential stocks, and we also had the NIO and Tesla as the pure EVs, because you want to have the pure exposure to this big change that are coming over the next 10 years where investors want to have the pure exposure. And I was out on Twitter saying, I hate these comparisons where you compare 450,000 production from Tesla-ish with 10 million from Volkswagen. These comparisons doesn't make sense. I sort of did the joke that it's like comparing Yahoo with Google in 1998, right? It's not comparable because all the big major governments around the world have said we want to have electrical vehicles on the streets. And the sooner the better, right? So you can say actually that Volkswagen is producing 10 million cars, the wrong cars, and Tesla is producing almost 500,000 of the right cars. And that's still a pretty big leap because it will be very costly in capex and short-term profit for the traditional car makers to do the transformation. But they need to keep going because it's where we end up.
Yep. Pete, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time this morning. Peter Garnery is the head of equity strategy at Saxo Bank. Anna, we do see still rallies across European equity indexes, but it's not the strength that we saw earlier. The FTSE adding 15 points right now to 74.97. The DAX up 0.5% to 13,560.
In the world of financial advice.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL. Every journey matters.
Good book. Refreshing drink. 6 degrees outside. 35 in here. This really is the life.
Could the gentleman in aisle 2 please remove himself from the hot tub?
So much for try before you buy.
Well, at Ford, you can. Test drive and purchase any new Ford car or commercial vehicle this February, and we'll give you an additional £500 off the recommended retail price. Search Ford Test Drive Promotion. Retail and small business customers only. Contract and register by 29th of February 2020 at participating Ford dealers. Excludes Ford scrappage.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids places subject to limited availability. 1 free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, February 6, 2020. Coming up this hour.
U.S. futures build on yesterday's record close for the S&P 500.
Tariff relief from China boosts sentiment as Beijing cuts levies on U.S. goods.
There's optimism on treatments for the coronavirus, though experts warn enthusiasm could be premature.
And oil gains as OPEC meets for a third day in Vienna.
President Trump weighs in on being acquitted in his impeachment trial. Plus, Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders are virtually tied in the Iowa caucuses. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. Yankee pitcher James Paxton just had back surgery. Can't pitch for 3 or 4 months. Easy win for the Nets. Rangers won 2. So did Seton Hall.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York. Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 106.1 Boston. Bloomberg 960 San Francisco. Sirius XM 119. And around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. And U.S. futures are building on yesterday's record close. It is coming up to 5:01 on Wall Street. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 8 points. Dow futures up 101. NASDAQ futures up 33. The DAX in Germany is up 0.6%. So is the CAC in Paris. And the FTSE 100 is up almost 0.2%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 1.64%. The yield on the 2-year 1.43%. COMEX gold is up 0.25% or $3.60 $1.70 at 15.6660 an ounce. The euro 1.1002 against the dollar. The yen 109.83. Nathan.
All right, Karen, thank you. We begin this morning with word that China is cutting tariffs on $75 billion of U.S. goods. The action is part of terms outlined in the Phase 1 trade agreement between the two countries. For more, we're joined live now by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
Yeah, and good morning, Nathan. The cut will be effective on Valentine's Day. Punitive tariffs adopted September 1st will be lowered, with the rate on some dropping from 10% to 5% and others from 5 to 2.5%. The measures are in line with what the U.S. is doing as part of the interim trade deal. Still, sources say Chinese officials are hoping the White House will agree to some flexibility on the agreement as the coronavirus weighs on the Chinese economy. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. That news plus waning concern over the coronavirus helped lift stocks in Asia, with the regional benchmark index posting its biggest one-day gain since June. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us now from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen. The Nikkei 225 rose 2.4% in Tokyo, while the announcement China will cut $75 billion worth of U.S. tariffs propelled shares in Hong Kong higher. The Hang Seng Index on track for its best day since December. China CSI 300 posted its best three-day gain since April. Shares of Chinese delivery firms jumping further after the cabinet rolled out fresh economic support for the country that includes waiving value-added taxes for distributors of key medical and consumer goods. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thanks. The death toll from the coronavirus has now passed 560, while confirmed cases climb above 28,000. As health officials race to develop a treatment, we've seen optimism over some drugs reportedly being prepared for trials, though experts warn that enthusiasm could be premature. Here with more is Bloomberg's Selena Wang in Beijing.
Even though you are seeing some bullishness from investors here, it does typically take years to research and develop a novel medicine for any disease, and viral illnesses pose particular challenges. The World Health Organization is also tempering those expectations, saying that there should be no expectations of an imminent breakthrough and that there have been no proven effective therapies yet.
Still, governments are stepping up efforts to contain the virus. India is no longer honoring visas for foreign nationals traveling from China. Hong Kong is quarantining arrivals from the mainland, while Australia, Taiwan, and Vietnam announced similar steps.
And we're seeing oil gain for a second day. There's growing confidence that OPEC and its allies will agree on deeper cuts to combat the outbreak's effect on demand. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern brings us more details now from London.
Talks between experts from OPEC and its allies in Vienna have spilled into an unprecedented third day. The kingdom has been pushing for the cartel to reduce output as the outbreak hits demand. But we've learned Russia's willing to extend the current cuts. It doesn't want additional measures. Crude whipped out 5 days of losses as the potential for action from the cartel and its allies offset an uptick in U.S. inventories. In London, Anne-Marie Hordern, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Anne-Marie, thank you. Checking prices now. West Texas Intermediate is up about 1% at $51.23 a barrel. Brent is up 1/3% at $55.47.
And equities in Europe are gaining as the stock 600 trades near a record. That's despite downbeat data out of Germany showing a deepening slump in manufacturing. Bloomberg's Ewan Potts joins us live now from London with the very latest. Good morning, Ewan.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. A blow to Europe's largest economy. Germany's manufacturing recession looks far from over, with the latest data showing factory orders falling at their fastest pace in more than a decade. Demand dropped 2.1% in December and is now down 8.7% from a year ago. China's coronavirus is disrupting global trade, and the US is still threatening tariffs on European imports. Live in London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Ewan, thank you. When it comes to a monetary response to the manufacturing slump and concerns over the coronavirus, the European Central Bank has limited options. President Christine Lagarde says a decade of crisis fighting has left policymakers with few options.
This low interest rate and low inflation environment has significantly reduced the scope for the ECB and other central banks worldwide to ease monetary policy in the face of an economic downturn.
And Lagarde says the coronavirus has added to economic uncertainty, and while there could be a significant short-term fallout, she expects no long-lasting effect.
Meantime, Citigroup warns the impact of the outbreak remains unclear. Strategists at Citi are reticent to say the full virus impact is behind us. As stocks hit fresh records, chief equity strategist Tobias Levkovich says a flattening yield curve points to more volatility ahead.
And we have a similar warning from J.P. Morgan. Strategists there say investors should tamp down on risk as the impact from the outbreak unfolds. They see a significant chance that new cases of the virus will reaccelerate as factories reopen in China. Futures are higher this morning. S&P futures up 8 points. Dow futures up 94. NASDAQ futures up 32. The DAX in Germany up 0.6%. 10-year Treasury up 3/32, yield 1.64%. And the yield on the 2-year 1.43%. NYMEX crude oil again up 1% at $51.28 a barrel. The euro 1.1003 against the dollar. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thanks a lot. It's 5:07 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is here with a check of what else is going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. President Trump was acquitted of impeachment. Mitt Romney was the lone Republican who voted guilty for impeachment. Now, President Trump will get a chance to weigh in at his news conference today at noon, which you'll hear live on Bloomberg. Bloomberg's Bob Moon reports the Trump campaign has already denounced the Utah Republican as an irrelevant relic.
Even as Romney announced a vote that will prevent Trump from claiming only Democrats wanted him out, the one-time Republican choice for president was already bracing for the fallout.
In some quarters, I will be vehemently denounced. I'm sure to hear abuse from the president and his supporters.
The president's son, Donald Jr., tweeted that Romney should be expelled from the GOP. Romney's niece, Ronna McDaniel, chairs the Republican National Committee. She responded that she and the party stand with President Trump. That was no surprise to Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
There are a whole lot of Republicans, I believe, who knew we were right, but said, I don't want the bother of being attacked relentlessly by the president and the hard right.
Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
New results from the Iowa Democratic caucuses show Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders nearly tied with almost all the votes counted. With 97% of the precincts in, Buttigieg has 26.2%. Sanders has 26.1%. Meanwhile, Joe Biden took ahead in the Iowa caucuses, coming in fourth.
I am not going to sugarcoat it. We took a gut punch in Iowa. The whole process took a gut punch. But look, this isn't the first time in my life I've been knocked down.
Biden went after Senator Sanders, calling him a Democratic socialist, and says Buttigieg has never held an office higher than mayor of a town of 100,000 people. The focus for Democrats shifted to New Hampshire, where the next primary will be held. At a New Hampshire town hall, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren says gun issues must be addressed, and it's going to take a national effort to get it done.
I want to be in an America where children don't have to have active shooter drills, where teachers don't have to worry about being shot. That's what we should all be driving toward. And there isn't going to be a single answer for that. It's going to take a lot of pieces to make that work.
He defrauded investors of more than $19 billion in history's biggest Ponzi scheme. Now Bernie Madoff is asking for an early release from his 150-year prison sentence, saying he has 18 months to live. Global News, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's coming up to 5:10 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, the first Yankee injury of 2020. There were dozens of them in 2019. James Paxton won 15 games in his first season in New York, had recent back surgery to remove a cyst. He's expected to miss at least the first month of the season, maybe the first two. Meanwhile, at the owners' meetings, Hal Steinbrenner's first comments on the Astros stealing signs when they beat the Yankees in the 2017 ALCS. He took a higher road than his father would have, but admitted made him angry and wonder if the Yanks would have won the World Series that year. The Knicks not going anywhere. They play Orlando tonight, but will they make a trade before today's deadline? Their leading scorer is Julius Randle. His name has been mentioned in trade rumors. He wants to stay a Knick.
I would love it, man. I came here, to be a part of this team. To try to help change, the culture and reshape the organization and, turn things around, try to get back to winning ways. So I would love, to continue to be a part of that vision that not only I have, but the guys who brought me here. So.
Blowout in Brooklyn last night. The Nets all over lowly Golden State, 129-88. The Nets' most lopsided win of the season. Rangers 5-3 win over Toronto at the Garden. They scored a pair of goals 6 seconds apart in the opening period. Seton Hall got 34 points from Miles Powell, who's making a case to be an All-American. The Pirates won at Georgetown 78-71. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
And John, Americans legally bet $13 billion on sports last year. That's according to a report from the American Gaming Association. It resulted in $118 million in tax revenue across the 14 states that allow it. Nevada, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania dominated as states with the most money bet, all reporting numbers in the billions. Legal sports betting is set to go live in at least 6 more states, as well as the District of Columbia this year. S&P futures higher by 7.5 points. Dow futures up 88. NASDAQ futures a gain of 30 points. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/O.
I'm Peter Jones. Lifting business performance is critical in today's uncertain times. But how do you keep up with changing regulations and rising demands? How do you break free from manual processes to raise productivity? The answer is technology that elevates performance and comes with industry-leading support. Over 1 million UK businesses, including my investment group, trust Sage to manage their finances, operations and people.
Elevate your business today with our free performance review. Visit sage.com/perform.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This is a live message from the Survivalist Network. There are reports of an impending zombie apocalypse reaching London. But don't panic. Our intel shows that for £199 a month with 0% APR representative, you can locally access the Toyota Hilux Invincible, the only vehicle with the build strength to withstand savage hordes of the undead. Once inside your Toyota Hilux, stay on this frequency for updates. You'll be fine.
0% APR representative on new sales of Hilux Invincible over 42 months. £199 per month. Customer deposit of £10,246 when financed through Access Toyota by 31st March 2020. £12,525 optional final payment. Subject status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
Winter joggers of London, it's freezing. Your legs are caked in mud and your nose is running faster than you. Then, get that heating on. You deserve it. Thanks to Hive Active Heating, you can control your heating wherever you are with a tap of the app, which could save you up to £120 a year by never having to heat an empty home. Buy today and get a free Amazon Echo Dot. Search Hive Heating. Hive services require broadband and Wi-Fi. Terms apply.
We are joined by Blackstone Managing Director and Chief Investment Strategist Joe Zeidel. Very interesting perspective that you have relative to one of our previous guests who seemed to be a little bit bearish on the economy. Walk me through some of the impacts that you see from the coronavirus on U.S. and international markets.
Before we talk about the impact of coronavirus, we do want to express our sympathy, for everybody who's been affected by the coronavirus directly, as well as everybody who's been impacted by the quarantines. It's something that we continue to watch very, very closely, of course, because of the huge human toll that it's taking. That said, my role as an investment strategist is to think about the markets and the economic impact that the spread of the coronavirus could have on the Chinese economy and the global economy in general. And what I would say is this was a critically important week for Chinese policymakers, and the decision to reopen the equity markets when they did, the decisions to cut rates and introduce stimulus into the economy, both fiscal and monetary stimulus, gave global investors a degree of confidence that the Chinese policymakers had at least taken the worst case scenario off the table.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks rising with U.S. stock index futures as China's plans for tariff cuts on U.S. imports added to optimism the global economy will weather the hit from the coronavirus. Treasuries are steady alongside the dollar. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 9 points this morning. Dow futures up 95. NASDAQ futures up 35. The DAX in Germany's up about 0.7%. 10-year Treasury up 3/32. The yield 1.64%. Yield on the 2-year 1.43%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.9% or 46 cents at $51.21 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.3% or $4.30 at $15.67.10 an ounce. The euro 1.1003 against the dollar. British pound 1.2973 and the yen at 109.81. And today we are watching for reports on non-farm productivity out at 8:30 Wall Street time, along with a weekly report on initial jobless claims. The Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index is out at 9:45. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. President Trump plans to address the results of his Senate impeachment trial during a speech today at the White House. There were not enough votes in the Senate to convict the president on either impeachment charge. President Trump and his allies say the votes are a full acquittal. Senator Mitt Romney was the lone Republican senator who voted to convict. You can hear President Trump's speech live at noon Wall Street time on Bloomberg. In the NBA, the Nets beat the Warriors 129-88. The Celtics won. In the NHL, the Rangers won. The Bruins won in overtime. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, it's 5:19 on Wall Street live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and ahead of that address that you will hear from President Trump on the result of his impeachment trial, we welcome in Wendy Schiller, Chair of the Political Science Department at Brown University. Good morning, Wendy. Always good talking with you. I mean, the impeachment verdict was pretty much a foregone conclusion, except perhaps for that lone vote to convict from Republican Senator Mitt Romney. Do you expect that we're going to hear something about that from the president at the podium today? He's talked about it on Twitter. Will he talk about it publicly, do you think?
Well, I mean, he should just take his victory lap. He's had a pretty good week. Iowa was a disaster for the Democrats. You're trying to defeat an incumbent president and you can't even run, a caucus you've been running pretty well for 40 years. So, and there's a lot of disarray in the Democratic Party right now. He's gave a, standard State of the Union speech. It was a little bit more politicized than most, but it wasn't all, really off the script for a lot of State of the Unions. You have a bunch of people, you point out to them, you basically tout your accomplishments. So I think he'd be better off just to say, well, you tried, you didn't get me, the Senate has spoken, let's move on. And that would be the smartest move, because looking, too vindictive, as we know this president can sometimes sound, but not always, right in front of everybody for like this focused speech. I think that is not going to play well with suburban voters. who are really probably still on the fence about Trump. Life is good, economy is good, stick with the person whose economy, the economy is really great. But if he continues to behave in a way that starts to really make people nervous about what he'd do in a second term, that's margins. And in this race, I think it's going to be a lot of margins that decide certain states.
Although the president in the past has banked on his base, carrying him forward and trying to, grab a few voters here and there that could try to bolster that base, is that still a strategy that can work for him?
Well, I've been tracking him on Gallup for the whole time because it's pretty consistent, and he's up in Gallup, by a couple of points. And that's really one of the first times you've seen any kind of bump for him since his inauguration day. So is he expanding his base? Nobody thought so, but we'll have to see over the next couple of months whether that holds, because his approval rating can go up and then it can go down depending on what he's doing. So if he can do that, then he can be more successful. But I don't see how that holds if he continues to behave in a way that looks like he feels unfettered completely. He can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And I think over time, when people focus on that and any associated dip in the economy, it just makes people nervous. And if people are nervous, maybe they don't vote for the Democrats, but maybe they stay home. And if they stay home in a couple of places like Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or, Arizona or North Carolina, and they sort of say, oh, he'll win anyway, I don't have to vote, then I think he can lose. And I think that's something they're starting to worry about. If he looks like it's too easy for him, then he'll suffer the same fate I think that Democrats did in 2016.
You're pointing to an avenue, I think, that Democrats could potentially exploit there. But how difficult will it be for Democrats to do that when, as you mentioned, the disarray we've seen in the Iowa caucuses and the still sort of muddied field here heading toward the further parts of the Democratic primary calendar?
Yeah, it's funny. Democrats not always, but most of the time have pretty chaotic primaries in the beginning, the primary system. They have proportional representation as you move forward beyond the caucuses, and people always have a shot. There's always people, still around in March where you think, wait, they shouldn't be around anymore. They're not viable. So it's not that concerning that it's not settled yet. But I think at the end of March, early April, if it still looks really dug in, I think it's an opening for other people who haven't been considered the favorite before. But it's still a long way to November, and it really depends on world conditions. It depends on what the president does. And of course, it depends on the economy. But for the Democrats, the strategy has to be to press that turnout among independents and suburban Republicans, particularly women that just are not comfortable with Trump but like the conditions of the country. Can you get them to say, I don't want to affirmatively vote for this person, but I won't vote for the Democrat, but I'm just going to stay home and get your base out? And I think that's, 2018 was a great year for the Democrats in that sense. So they just have to make sure their turnout gets up. And it's hard to generate turnout when you're angry at somebody. You'd think it wouldn't be, but it's, people who are enthusiastic get out the door more easily. So it's a very big uphill climb for the Democrats, but it's still really early.
Very quickly here, what are your expectations for the New Hampshire debate tomorrow night?
Well, Pete Buttigieg has, new life, and the idea that he wasn't viable, he's too young. Iowa skews a little older, and he's, toe-to-toe with Bernie Sanders. I think Bernie Sanders got denied the kind of momentum he would have liked coming out of Iowa. And I think if Buttigieg does well in New Hampshire, I think it changes the conversation. And if Biden comes in fourth in New Hampshire, I think it really slows his momentum, even though he'll do well theoretically in South Carolina and probably on Super Tuesday. It hurts Biden a lot. And I think Buttigieg emerges as a real competitor, possibly to Sanders.
All right, Wendy Schiller, chair of the Political Science Department at Brown University. You can hear that debate tomorrow night from Manchester, New Hampshire, 8 p.m. Wall Street time here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P futures higher by 9 points. Dow futures up 100. NASDAQ futures a gain of 36 points. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Wall Street is headed for a higher open with the S&P 500 and NASDAQ starting at record highs today as China's plans for tariff cuts on American imports add to the optimism that the global economy will weather the hit from the coronavirus. The broader U.S. equity market surged more than 1% yesterday. The Dow jumped 483 points. As the deadly coronavirus spreads beyond China, the ensuing panic is inflaming bigotry against people of Asian descent around the world. One place where that's playing out is in the back seats of Uber and Lyft facelift cars. In interviews and online, customers and drivers of Asian descent report numerous complaints, including inappropriate comments or cancellations due to their appearance or name. And Bernie Madoff is asking for early release from his 150-year prison sentence. The 81-year-old behind history's largest ever Ponzi scheme says he has 18 months to live due to illness, including kidney failure. Madoff defrauded investors of more than $19 billion. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving.
I'm Peter Jones. Lifting business performance is critical in today's uncertain times. But how do you keep up with changing regulations and rising demands? How do you break free from manual processes to raise productivity? The answer is technology that elevates performance and comes with industry-leading support. Over 1 million UK businesses, including my investment group, trust Sage to manage their finances, operations and people.
Elevate your business today with our free performance review. Visit sage.com/perform.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Good book. Refreshing drink. 6 degrees outside. 35 in here. This really is the life.
Could the gentleman in aisle 2 please remove himself from the hot tub?
So much for try before you buy.
Well, at Ford, you can. Test drive and purchase any new Ford car or commercial vehicle this February, and we'll give you an additional £500 off the recommended retail price. Search Ford Test Drive Promotion. Retail and small business customers only. Contract and registered by 29th of February 2020 at participating Ford dealers. Excludes Ford scrappage.
Welcome to Cathay Island. We hope you've enjoyed flying Cathay Airways. Oh, and Cathay, congratulations on the Euro Millions win.
This Friday's Euro Millions is a massive £105 million super jackpot. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing.
And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are higher following news that China is cutting tariffs on $75 billion of U.S. goods in half. The action is part of terms outlined in the Phase 1 trade agreement between the two countries. For more, we're joined live now by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Karen. The cuts are scheduled for Valentine's Day. China is honoring the terms of the interim trade deal reached with the White House. But at the same time, it's also hoping for some flexibility from the U.S. That's because the coronavirus has slowed Chinese economic growth. A clause in the trade agreement does say a natural disaster or other unforeseeable events can allow for a delay. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
And John, meantime, the death toll from the coronavirus has now passed 560, while confirmed cases climb above 28,000. Health officials are racing to develop a treatment as the illness continues to devastate China. Let's get more now from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
Today, day 14 since China locked down Hubei, marking the end of the incubation period for infection. Now, markets may be looking past all this, but everywhere in Hubei, scenes of chaos as residents cope with the world's biggest ever quarantine. The race is on for a vaccine, but the WHO says that's a long way off. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. Oil rallying for a second day. There is optimism OPEC will agree on deeper cuts in response to the virus. And checking prices now, NYMEX crude oil up 1% at $51.26 a barrel. Brent is up 0.25% at $55.43.
In Europe, German factory orders fell at their fastest pace in more than a decade. Demand fell 2.1% in December.
On the earnings front, we get results from almost 3 dozen companies in the S&P 500 today, and headlining that list, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Cigna, and Twitter.
Shares of Peloton are down more than 6% in early trading. The exercise equipment company says sales in the current quarter will be lower than estimates.
GoPro shares dropped almost 15% in late trading, the digital camera company reporting disappointing earnings and revenue.
And we continue to track Tesla. After an epic 6-day rally, Tesla shares tumbled 17% yesterday. This morning, the stock is up about 1%.
S&P futures up about 10 points this morning. Dow futures up 106 and NASDAQ futures up 38. The 10-year Treasury up 4/32. Yield 1.63% and the yield on the 2-year 1.43%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1% or 49 cents at $51.24 a barrel. The euro is at 1.1005 against the dollar. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, thanks, Karen. It's 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is back with a check of what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. President Trump is expected to deliver a speech today after being acquitted in his Senate impeachment trial. The president will speak at noon Wall Street time at the White House, and he said that he'll be talking about our country's victory over the impeachment hoax. Bloomberg will carry today's speech live. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has more on the acquittal vote in the Senate.
The votes 52-48 and 53-47 on abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. The major drama was Mitt Romney saying on the floor before the vote that he would become the only Republican to vote guilty on the first article of abuse of power.
The grave question the Constitution tasks senators to answer is whether the president committed an act so extreme and egregious that it rises to the level of a high crime and misdemeanor. Yes, he did.
He did vote guilty on abuse, but did vote to acquit on the second article of obstruction of Congress. So this episode is ready for the history files, but Democrats are still talking about subpoenaing John Bolton and the Republicans Hunter Biden. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
The latest round of results from Iowa Democratic caucuses shows Pete Buttigieg with 26.2% over Bernie Sanders with 26.1%. with 97% of precincts reporting. Meanwhile, Joe Biden, who came in fourth, is hoping to pull off a win in New Hampshire's primary next week. Biden, speaking at a town hall in Somersworth, took aim at one of his rivals, Bernie Sanders.
He calls himself a democratic socialist. Well, we're already seeing what Donald Trump is going to do with that.
When asked about Pete Buttigieg, Biden says it's a risk for the party to nominate someone who's never held an office higher than mayor of a town of 100,000 people. Acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf said his department was suspending trusted traveler and global entry programs for New York residents over a new state law allowing undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses. Wolf says that the suspension of the programs used by travelers to quickly move through customs and security at airports was effective immediately. Bernie Madoff is asking for compassionate release from his 150-year prison sentence due to kidney failure, saying he has less than 18 months to live. The 81-year-old pleaded guilty in 2009 to 11 federal counts of fraudulent investment involving billions of dollars. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's just before 6:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, the Yankees are hopeful they won't be as decimated by injuries this year as they were a year ago. But yesterday came news James Paxton needed back surgery to remove a cyst, and he may not pitch until June. Paxton won 15 games in his first season in pinstripes. The big Mookie Betts trade not yet official. The Red Sox work to get 21-year-old pitcher Bristol Greatrall. He's already had Tommy John surgery and a shoulder injury, and now he may be taken out of the trade, which is still expected to happen. And Betts moved from Boston to the Dodgers. NBA trade deadlines today. The Miami Heat have a deal in place to get veteran Andre Iguodala from Memphis, where he had refused to play. The Heat may also acquire Danilo Gallinari from Oklahoma City. D'Angelo Russell may be on the move from Golden State. A year ago, Russell was a Nets All-Star. He was back in Brooklyn last night. He missed all 8 of his three-pointers. The Nets crushed the Warriors 129-88. Kevin Durant was on the Nets bench watching his new team beat his old one. Rangers in Toronto at the Garden. 1-1 first period.
Kreider in for the face-off. Wins it. Sabatic. How about that? Kreider wins the face-off. And Sabatic cases in. It's 2-1 Rangers.
Call MSG. 6 seconds later, Kreider scored. The Rangers went on to win 5-3. Seton Hall won at Georgetown 78-71. Huge game from Miles Powell. 34 points. He also had 8 blocked shots as the Pirates go to 9-1 in the Big East. For the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. It's 5:37 on Wall Street. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with the cover on Tesla CEO Elon Musk taking drastic steps to silence short sellers. Also in this week's issue, why mansions on the market in Palm Beach, right near the president's Mar-a-Lago resort, are going unsold. James Tarmy wrote the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
It's this very surreal place because it's incredibly thin. Most of the time, there's no more than 2 or 3 lots deep between the bay side and the ocean side. It's very expensive, and it has only gotten more expensive this year, where it has been white hot.
You can read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go. Listen to Business Week with Carol Nasser and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio, and watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device by visiting youtube.com and searching Bloomberg Global News. 5:38 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
Nathan, Milford, Connecticut-based Subway is cutting 300 jobs at its headquarters. The sandwich chain says it's streamlining and simplifying its business. The cuts are the latest move by Burger King chief executive John Chidsey, who took charge at the Subway chain in November. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont has proposed legalizing marijuana and overhauling the state's economic development strategy, part of a budget proposal that calls for no income tax increases. Lamont also wants to ban flavored vaping products and institute a new excise tax on non-flavored e-cigarette merchandise. Prada will take steps to fight racism and promote diversity under a deal struck with New York City officials Wednesday. The agreement's connected to the controversy over its sale of keychain figurines in 2018 featuring so-called Prada Malia objects that evoked blackface characters. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
Thanks, Ed. It's 5:39 on Wall Street, and Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on WHAS in Louisville. Fast food giant Yum China said the coronavirus will affect profits this year.
I'm Steve Podeskin on 1010 Wins in New York. We're talking about J.P. Morgan Chase today, set to inform employees who will be laid off.
I'm Roger Hearing on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on the government's growth targets, which a leading think tank says are unrealistic.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting Toyota's reporting higher than expected quarterly profit.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. And one more story we're watching this morning, HSBC rolling out its third overhaul in a decade. Chairman Mark Tucker is looking at job cuts, unit mergers, disposals, and closures. Investors are getting frustrated. 2 post-crisis resets and Tucker's first pick as CEO all flopped. S&P futures not flopping at all. They're up 8.5 points right now. Dow futures a gain of 94, and NASDAQ futures are higher by 33.5 points. This is Bloomberg.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
As the boss, I expect only the best for my office. Air conditioning, super comfortable seating, digital radio, and rear parking sensors. From dealing with deliveries to balancing the books, my new Citroën van, my office on the move. Award-winning Citroën vans. Like you, they do it all, with £500 off during the February van event. Citroën. £500 discount inclusive of VAT on qualifying relay, dispatch and Berlingo vans ordered from 1st to 29th of February and registered by the 31st of March. Business users only. Full T's and C's at citroen.co.uk.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere. Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem. And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
Wouldn't it be nice to keep things you normally lose? Your favourite scarf, your train of thought, or your mobile data. Because with most other networks, you get to the end of the month and your data is, well, never to be seen again. But unlike anyone else, With Sky Mobile, you can roll and keep all your unused data for up to 3 years. Sky Mobile. Hello, possible.
Full terms and conditions at sky.com/mobile.
TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Speaker of the House says she refuses to accept this acquittal. Whatever that means. Perhaps she will tear up the verdict like she tore up the State of the Union address.
Republican Senator Mitch McConnell invoking Nancy Pelosi as he urged senators to acquit President Trump of impeachment. All GOP senators except Mitt Romney were in lockstep as the president was acquitted. Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer said it was not a happy day.
Democrats walked out of the Senate chamber with their heads held high because we sought the truth. We did everything we could to get the truth. The American people believe that.
New results from the Iowa Democratic caucuses show Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders nearly tied with 97% of votes counted. A capsule carrying astronauts, including NASA's Christina Koch, has landed safely in Kazakhstan. Actor, producer, author Kirk Douglas has died. He was 103. I'm John Trout.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Is that good for American finance? What is happening with the headcount?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks rising along with U.S. stock index futures as China's plans for tariff cuts on U.S. imports added to optimism the global economy will weather the hit from the coronavirus. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 8 points, Dow futures up 90, NASDAQ futures up 31, the DAX in Germany's up 0.6%. 10-year Treasury up 4/32, the yield 1.63%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.43%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1.25%, up 65 cents at $51.39 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1/3%, up $5.70 at $15.6840 an ounce. The euro is at 1.1002 against the dollar. The British pound 1.2970 and the yen at 109.83. And today we are watching for reports on on-farm productivity at 8:30 Wall Street time, along with the weekly report on initial jobless claims and the Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index out at 9:45. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the Senate voted to acquit President Trump on charges he abused his power and obstructed Congress. Utah Senator Mitt Romney was the only Republican to break with his party and find Trump guilty of seeking a political favor from the Ukrainian government. The Department of Homeland Security says that it would no longer let New York residents enroll in its trusted traveler programs because of a new state law that blocked federal immigration officials from accessing motor vehicle records. The law allowed people without legal permission to be in the United States to apply for driver's licenses. A powerful winter storm in the central U.S. dropped snow as far south as El Paso, Texas, while areas of the Deep South were at risk of severe weather, including tornadoes and torrential rains. In the NBA, the Nets beat the Warriors. The Celtics won. In the NHL, the Rangers won. The Bruins won in overtime. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Mike Lamar. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. I want to pass along this red headline that just crossed the Bloomberg terminal moments ago. A delegate to the OPEC Plus meeting that's been happening for the last 3 days in Vienna says the Joint Technical Committee of the cartel is recommending an output cut of 600,000 barrels a day to offset the demand impact of the coronavirus on crude demand. The recommendation still has to be discussed, though, by OPEC ministers, and the group has not yet agreed on a date for an early meeting. Checking prices right now, Brent is up 0.3% at $55.44 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate higher by 1% on the session at $51.27. It's 5:49 on Wall Street, and live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak. I'm Nathan Hager. Let's catch up now on some of the corporate stories we're watching this morning. Tesla's wild ride looks set to continue today. It is one of the most active stocks in early trading, up more than 2%. This week's shares saw daily gains of 20 and 13%, followed by yesterday's 17% slump. Even before the pullback, analysts said Tesla's surge was overdone. We spoke with Neuberger Berman Managing Director Steve Eisman yesterday, who had been shorting Tesla.
When a stock becomes unmoored from valuation because it has certain dynamic growth aspects to it and has cult-like aspects to it, you have to just walk away.
Still, the bulls remain, including ARK investment analyst Tasha Keeney, who sees shares of Tesla surging 10 times from their current level.
Over the next 5 years, our expected value for the stock is $7,000. And that's because it's a leader in electric autonomous vehicles, and that's the future of the auto market.
Right now, shares of Tesla are down 1.7% in early trading. Qualcomm is losing ground in the pre-market. The chip maker's lowering expectations for sales growth next quarter, saying the payoff from the smartphone shift to 5G will take longer than anticipated. Still, Mike Walkley, who covers Qualcomm for Canaccord Genuity, sees room for the stock to run from here.
Stock's off a little bit because June quarter guidance was flat with March. But if you look at the cadence of the smartphone market and the timing of Qualcomm's second generation modem that kind of starts shipping late in the June quarter, they did indicate they expected another big step function in their revenue starting in the September quarter, which would also be the first time they're shipping back into Apple for Apple's upcoming 5G phones.
At the moment, Qualcomm shares are down 1.4% in early trading. Meantime, Peloton is down 6%. That's after the exercise equipment company projected sales for the current quarter below estimates. Let's get more on those earnings from Peloton now. From Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Peloton said revenue in its fiscal third quarter will be $470 to $480 million, missing the average projection of $494.2 million. The weak forecast comes after a strong second quarter that saw revenue rise 77% from a year earlier to $466.3 million. Peloton, which sells a stationary bike, a treadmill, and a subscription-based app for live and on-demand classes, reported a loss of 20 cents a share in the 3 months ending December 31st. That was better than analyst estimates for a loss of 33 cents. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Charlie. On the IPO front, Casper Sleep wrapped up its offering by pricing shares at the bottom of a reduced range. The bed company cut its price target from about $18 a share down to $12. We get more now from Leanna Baker in our Bloomberg 960 San Francisco newsroom.
Clearly, demand didn't come in very strong, and they had to take this very unusual step, cutting the valuation almost in half from the $1.1 billion valuation it had just a year ago. So now it's looking like it'll be at about $500 million or lower. So this is really dramatic, but it makes sense with what we've seen in the IPO market, where unprofitable companies just don't find a lot of love on Wall Street.
Shares of Casper expected to start trading today on the New York Stock Exchange. Finally, in Europe, Société Générale is out with earnings. The French bank posted gains in equities trading and fixed income revenue. It's also cutting jobs and costs as part of a restructuring and pledging to boost shareholder returns while shifting to a new cash dividend policy. We spoke with SocGen CEO Frédéric Oudéa about the results.
The engine to generate revenues is there, and we will get the benefit of this restructuring for the full year, the full benefit in 2020 on the cost side. So that's why we are confident to improve effectively the net income and the profitability on the capital.
Still, Société Générale is warning investors to expect muted revenue growth and signaling it's set to miss its return on tangible equity target this year. Right now, shares of SocGen are up almost 1% in Paris. Those are some of the corporate stories we're watching. Now let's look at some of the legal news on the agenda. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
The Federal Communications Commission has proposed using frequencies located between broadcast TV channels to expand broadband internet service to rural and underserved areas. The Chicago Cubs aren't in the clear yet. A federal court ruled the team must face an author's lawsuit charging a Cubs employee retweeted copyrighted material from his book. The Seventh Circuit ruled a trial court was right to throw out a complaint alleging that text messages sent by Subway restaurants violated a robocall law.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now other legal news we're watching this morning. The U.S. mulling a plan to withdraw from a global pact worth $1.7 trillion in government contracts. That's according to sources who tell us officials in the Trump administration are circulating a draft executive order that would trigger a U.S. exit from the World Trade Organization's Government Procurement Agreement, also known as GPA. For more on the move, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with John Verono, former general counsel to the U.S. Trade Representative and current partner at Covington and Burling.
So this is just a draft executive order that we're talking about. Is this being put out there so that Trump's administration can gain leverage in, for example, some of the trade talks ahead with the UK and the EU?
I think that's a big part of it, which is not to say that it's not something that this administration wouldn't follow through on. There have been a number of actions that have been suggested by the president in the trade arena and have been discounted early on as mere bluffs, but in time they've turned out to be actions that he's followed through on. So I wouldn't completely underestimate the possibility of the president actually withdrawing the U.S. from this agreement, but I think whether it's a mere bluff or whether he follows through on it, I think it is largely geared towards creating some leverage over the EU, Canada, and other countries with regard to other U.S. trade interests.
How can an executive order pull us out of a trade agreement?
You may recall the president had threatened to withdraw the U.S. from NAFTA, and there was an ongoing debate in the Congress and among trade and constitutional law experts about whether the president has authority under the Constitution to withdraw the U.S. from these trade agreements. And it is still a matter of dispute. My own view is that the president does have authority under the Constitution to withdraw the United States from international agreements, but obviously only Congress can change U.S. statutes. So to the extent that the GPA reflects U.S. statute wouldn't change merely by the fact that the U.S. was withdrawn from the obligations.
So if the U.S. were to withdraw from the GPA, who would suffer? Would any American companies suffer?
Yes. I mean, as is always the case with these trade actions, it pits one U.S. interest against others. So in this case, U.S. consumers, and in this case taxpayers, would suffer because they would have less access to the best services at the best prices and the best goods at the best prices. But also U.S. producers who rely on exports for their goods and services, they would suffer because they would no longer have guaranteed access to foreign markets like Europe that are important to these U.S. exporters.
And that's John Verono, a partner at Covington and Burling, speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Paul Allen.
Now China.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
As le boss, I expect only the best for my office. Air conditioning, super comfortable seating, digital radio, and rear parking sensors. From dealing with deliveries to balancing the books, my new Citroën van, my office on the move. Award-winning Citroën vans. Like you, they do it all. With £500 off during the February van event. Citroën. £500 discount inclusive of VAT on qualifying relay, dispatch and Berlingo vans ordered from 1st to 29th of February and registered by the 31st of March. Business users only. Full T's and C's at citroen.co.uk.
One of these days these boots are gonna walk all over you.
Sign up to Walk All Over Cancer with Cancer Research UK. Walk 10,000 steps every day in March and help raise money for life-saving research.
Are you ready, Boots?
Know any friends keen on walks?
Start walking.
Use the 10,000 Steps a Day challenge to team up and bring friends and family together to help beat cancer. Come on, search Walk All Over Cancer and sign up now.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, February 6, 2020. Coming up this hour.
U.S. futures build on yesterday's record close for the S&P 500.
Tariff relief from China boosts sentiment as Beijing cuts levies on U.S. goods.
There's optimism on treatments for the coronavirus, though experts warn enthusiasm could be premature.
And oil gains as OPEC meets for a third day in Vienna.
President Trump weighs in on being acquitted in his impeachment trial. Plus, Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders are virtually tied in the Iowa caucuses. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. Yankee pitcher James Paxton just had back surgery. Can't pitch for 3 or 4 months. Easy win for the Nets. Rangers won 2. So did Seton Hall.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York. Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 106.1 Boston. Bloomberg 960 San Francisco. Sirius XM 119. And around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And good Thursday morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures building on yesterday's record close. We're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 6 points this morning. Dow futures up 73. NASDAQ futures up 23. The DAX in Germany's up 0.5%. So is the CAC in Paris. And the FTSE 100 up 0.2%. 10-year Treasury up 5/30 seconds. Yield 1.63%. Yield on the 2-year 1.43%. COMEX gold is up 0.5% or $7.90 at $15.70.60 an ounce. The euro at 1.1003 against the dollar, and the yen 109.80. Nathan.
Karen, we begin with word that China is cutting tariffs on $75 billion of U.S. goods. The action is part of terms outlined in the Phase 1 trade agreement between the two countries. For more, we're joined live now by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And hey, good morning. The cut will be effective on Valentine's Day. Punitive tariffs adopted September 1st will be lowered, with the rate on some dropping from 10 to 5% and others from 5 to 2.5%. Now, the measures are in line with what the U.S. is doing as part of the interim trade deal. Still, sources say Chinese officials are hoping the White House will agree to some flexibility on the agreement as the coronavirus weighs on the Chinese economy. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. That news plus waning concern over the coronavirus helped lift stocks in Asia, with a regional benchmark index posting its biggest one-day gain since June. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us now from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen. The Nikkei 225 rose 2.4% in Tokyo, while the announcement China will cut $75 billion worth of U.S. tariffs propelled shares in Hong Kong higher. The Hang Seng Index on track for its best day since December. China CSI 300 posted its best three-day gain since April. Shares of Chinese delivery firms jumping further after the cabinet rolled out fresh economic support for the country that includes waiving value-added taxes for distributors of key medical and consumer goods. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you, Juliet. The death toll from the coronavirus is now past 560, while confirmed cases climb above 28,000. As health officials race to develop a treatment, we have seen optimism over some drugs reportedly being prepared for trials, though experts warn that enthusiasm could be premature. Here with more is Bloomberg's Selena Wang in Beijing.
Even though you are seeing some bullishness from investors here, it does typically take years to research and develop a novel medicine for any disease, and viral illnesses pose particular challenges. The World Health Organization is also tempering those expectations, saying that there should be no expectations of an imminent breakthrough and that there have been no proven effective therapies yet.
Governments are stepping up efforts to contain the virus. India is no longer honoring visas for foreign nationals traveling from China. Hong Kong is quarantining arrivals from the mainland, while Australia, Taiwan, and Vietnam announced similar steps.
OPEC and its allies are meeting for a third day in Vienna. Discussions center on the possibility of deeper production cuts to combat the outbreak's effect on oil demand. A delegate from the Joint Technical Committee tells us it plans to recommend cutting output by about 600,000 barrels a day, and it appears to be sending crude lower, with traders possibly expecting a deeper cut than that. Checking prices right now, NYMEX crude oil is higher. It's up 0.7%. It's at $51.10 a barrel, but Brent is lower, down 0.1% at $55.23.
Equities in Europe are gaining as the Stoxx 600 trades near a record. That's despite downbeat data out of Germany showing a deepening slump in manufacturing. Bloomberg's Ewan Potts joins us live now from London with the very latest. Good morning, Ewan.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. A blow to Europe's largest economy. Germany's manufacturing recession looks far from over, with the latest data showing factory orders falling at their fastest pace in more than a decade. Demand dropped 2.1% in December and is now down 8.7% from a year ago. China's coronavirus is disrupting global trade, and the US is still threatening tariffs on European imports. Live in London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ewan, thank you. When it comes to a monetary response to the manufacturing slump and concerns over the coronavirus, the European Central Bank has limited options. President Christine Lagarde says a decade of crisis fighting has left policymakers with few options.
This low interest rate and low inflation environment has significantly reduced the scope for the ECB and other central banks worldwide to ease monetary policy in the face of an economic downturn.
And Lagarde said the coronavirus has added to economic uncertainty, and while there could be a significant short-term fallout, she expects no long-lasting effect.
Meantime, Citigroup warns the impact of the outbreak remains unclear. Strategists at Citi are reticent to say the full virus impact is behind us. As stocks hit fresh records, chief equity strategist Tobias Lefkovich says a flattening yield curve points to more volatility ahead.
And we have a similar warning from J.P. Morgan. Strategists there say investors should tamp down on risk as the impact from the outbreak unfolds. They see a significant chance that new cases of the virus will reaccelerate as factories reopen in China.
Coming up on the economic front, the government issues data on weekly jobless claims. Economists anticipate little change with a reading around 215,000. Here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Unemployment is running at a half-decade low and poised to stay there. Bloomberg Economics says the 4-week average for jobless claims will continue to move sideways. The prior week's reading, 216,000, was one of the lowest since the 1960s. On Friday, the government issues its January payroll report, and economists are forecasting faster growth. On Wednesday, industry data from ADP showed business payrolls registered the biggest gain in 5 years. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Vinny, thank you. And S&P futures are up 9 points this morning. Dow futures up 95 and NASDAQ futures up 31. 10-year Treasury up 4/30 seconds, yield 1.63%. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, thanks, Karen. It's 6:07 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. President Trump was acquitted of impeachment. Mitt Romney was the lone Republican who voted guilty for impeachment. Now President Trump will get the chance to weigh in at his news conference today at noon, which you'll hear live on Bloomberg. Bloomberg's Bob Moon reports the Trump campaign has already denounced the Utah Republican as an irrelevant relic.
Even as Romney announced a vote that will prevent Trump from claiming only Democrats wanted him out, the one-time Republican choice for president was already bracing for the fallout.
In some quarters, I will be vehemently denounced. I'm sure to hear abuse from the president and his supporters.
The president's son, Donald Jr., tweeted that Romney should be expelled from the GOP. Romney's niece, Ronna McDaniel, chairs the Republican National Committee. She responded that she and the party stand with President Trump. That was no surprise to Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
There are a whole lot of Republicans, I believe, who knew we were right, but said, I don't want the bother of being attacked relentlessly by the president and the hard right.
Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
New results from the Iowa Democratic caucuses show Pete Buttigieg leading Bernie Sanders, but nearly tied. With 97% of the precincts counted, Buttigieg has 26.2 and Sanders has 26.1. Meanwhile, Joe Biden took a hit in the Iowa caucuses, coming in fourth.
I am not going to sugarcoat it. We took a gut punch in Iowa. The whole process took a gut punch. But look, this isn't the first time in my life I've been knocked down.
Biden went after Senator Sanders, calling him a Democratic socialist, and says Buttigieg has never held an office higher than mayor of a town of 100,000 people. The focus for Democrats shifts to New Hampshire, where the next primary will be held.